A little girl walked into a room full of outlaws on the worst night of her life. She was 8 years old. She weighed 43 pounds. And when she opened her mouth in front of 150 battle-scarred bikers, the words that came out destroyed every man in that building. My stepfather only lets me eat once a week. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And the president of the Steel Guardians Motorcycle Club, a man who'd survived 3 combat tours and buried 6 brothers, felt something crack inside his chest that no war had ever touched. What happened next turned a small-town Friday night into a full-scale hunt. Stay with me until the very end of this one. If this story hits you, drop a like, leave a comment, tell me what city you're watching from. Let's get into it. The rain started around 6 and never stopped. It came sideways across the parking lot of the Iron Bell Tavern, hammering the corrugated tin awning above the front entrance and turning the gravel lot into a shallow lake that reflected the neon Budweiser sign bleeding red through the downpour. 17 motorcycles sat in a row along the east wall, their chrome catching fractured light every time lightning split the sky over Harlan County. The bikes belonged to the Steel Guardians, a brotherhood of combat veterans and blue-collar ghosts who'd been running charity events out of the Iron Bell for the better part of a decade. Tonight was the annual community fundraiser, open mic, donated food, local families welcome. Inside, the noise was dense, pool balls cracking against each other. Someone's kid running between tables, a woman laughing too loud near the jukebox. The smell of pulled pork and cheap beer and wet leather filled the air like something you could chew. The Steel Guardians occupied the center tables, 15 men and 3 women wearing black cuts with the club's winged skull patch across the back. Some had beards that reached their collars. Some had prosthetic limbs hidden under denim. All of them had the same quiet weight behind their eyes, the kind that comes from seeing things that don't wash off. Ryder Kane sat at the head table with his back to the wall because he always sat with his back to the wall. 44 years old, 6'2", a scar running from his left temple to the corner of his jaw where a piece of Iraqi shrapnel had kissed him goodbye in Fallujah. He wore a faded black t-shirt under his cut, and his knuckles were wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He hadn't touched the plate of food in front of him. He rarely ate at these things. His stomach had been a war zone since 2005, and nobody talked about it because Ryder didn't talk about anything. "You gonna stare at that brisket all night, or you gonna let someone else have it?" Lena Marsh dropped into the chair across from him. Vice President, former Army medic. She had a voice like gravel poured over honey and a left hand that shook when she was tired, which was always. She'd lost 2 fingers in Kandahar and replaced them with attitude. "Not hungry," Ryder said. "You're never hungry. That's not a personality trait, Ryder. That's a symptom." He didn't answer. His eyes moved across the room, scanning exits, counting heads, reading body language. Old habits from old wars that never ended, just changed locations. The open mic had been running for an hour. A teenage kid played acoustic guitar badly. A retired teacher read a poem about her late husband. A guy from the local fire department told a joke that landed flat and got a mercy laugh from the back row. The whole thing was easy, harmless, the kind of small-town warmth that existed in the spaces between real life. Then the front door opened. Nobody noticed at first. The rain was loud and the hinges on the Iron Bell's door had been broken since before anyone could remember. But Ryder noticed. He always noticed doors. A girl stood in the frame, small, soaked, her hair plastered to the sides of her face like dark seaweed. She wore a yellow raincoat 2 sizes too big with the sleeves rolled up past her wrists, and she clutched a torn backpack against her chest with both arms, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her sneakers were duct-taped at the toes. Her jeans were muddy to the knees, and she stood perfectly still in the doorway, not stepping in, not stepping out, just standing there with rainwater pooling around her feet, staring into the room with eyes that were far too large for her face. Ryder's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. "Lena." "I see her." The girl couldn't have been more than 8. She looked younger because of how thin she was. The kind of thin that doesn't come from being a picky eater. The kind that sits in the cheekbones and the wrists and the way the collarbone presses against skin like it's trying to escape. She scanned the room the way Ryder scanned rooms, looking for threats, calculating distance, finding exits. He recognized the movement because it lived in his own spine. A woman near the door tried to approach her. Sweetheart, are you lost? The girl flinched so hard she nearly dropped the backpack. She didn't answer. She just stared at the woman with a flatness that no child should own. Hey, Ryder's voice cut across the table, low. Lena, go easy. Don't crowd her. Lena was already on her feet. She moved through the crowd with the practiced calm of someone who'd spent years approaching injured people in hostile territory. Slow hands, soft voice, eyes steady. She knelt 6 feet from the girl, keeping distance, keeping low. Hey there, my name's Lena. You're safe in here, okay? Nobody's gonna touch you. The girl's eyes moved from Lena's face to the patches on her vest, then to the room full of bikers behind her. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she looked at the stage where the open mic stand sat empty, its single spotlight casting a pale circle on the wooden floor. Can I talk? The girl said. Her voice was so small it barely registered above the rain on the roof. Lena blinked. You want to use the microphone? A nod. Barely. Lena looked back at Ryder. He was already standing. He gave a single nod, the kind that moved through the steel guardians like an electrical current. Every member straightening slightly, attention sharpening, the room's energy shifting from casual to something harder. The girl walked to the stage alone. She climbed the 2 wooden steps with the deliberate care of someone who'd learned that moving carefully kept you invisible. She stood behind the microphone stand, which was taller than she was, and someone in the front row adjusted it down for her. She flinched again when the man reached over her head, then steadied herself. The room was still noisy, people talking, forks scraping plates, the jukebox murmuring something by Johnny Cash. Then she spoke. My name is Maddie. Her voice cracked through the speakers, thin and fractured, and something about it, the smallness of it, the way it carried the weight of something enormous inside something tiny, made the room start to quiet. My stepfather only lets me eat once a week. Silence hit the iron bell like a freight train, not the comfortable silence of people listening, the awful silence of people processing something their brains didn't want to accept. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-word. Somewhere near the bar, a glass was set down so carefully it didn't make a sound. A few nervous laughs scattered across the back of the room, the involuntary sound humans make when reality presents something too terrible to immediately absorb. But those laughs died the second people actually looked at the girl, at her hollow cheeks, at the way her collarbones jutted against the neckline of a shirt that hung off her like a pillowcase, at her hands, trembling so violently the microphone stand vibrated, and at her eyes. The bruises weren't visible, not in the traditional sense. Travis Boone was too smart for that. But the damage was there, buried behind her pupils like smoke behind glass. The kind of damage that lives in the nervous system, not on the skin. The kind that makes an 8-year-old scan a room for exits. He says food is for people who earn it, Maddie whispered. Ryder Kane felt something collapse inside his ribcage. Not his heart, that had gone numb years ago. Something deeper, something structural. The load-bearing wall between the man he'd become and the man he'd been before 3 tours stripped him down to instinct. He looked at this girl and he saw every village kid in Iraq who'd approached his convoy with the same flat, ancient stare. Children who understood danger the way adults understood weather, as something constant and inescapable. One by one, the Steel Guardians rose from their chairs. It started with Ryder, then Lena, then Grit, the 6'5" sergeant-at-arms who hadn't spoken more than 10 words in any given week since he came back from his 4th deployment with a titanium plate in his skull and a silence that could fill stadiums. Then Deacon, the club's chaplain, whose title was ceremonial and whose past was classified. Then others, Hatchet, Banks, Mercy, Rooster, Stitch, names that sounded like call signs because most of them were. 150 bikers stood. Nobody touched their food. Nobody said a word. The girl stared out at the standing wall of leather and scars and silence. And for the first time since she'd walked through the door, her lower lip trembled, not from fear, from the shock of being heard. Ryder walked to the stage. His boots were heavy on the wooden floor. A sound that made Maddie tense, then slowly uncoil when she saw his face. He didn't smile. Smiling would have been a lie, and kids could smell lies the way dogs smell fear. He just stood beside the stage, not too close, and said, "You don't have to earn food, Maddie. Not here. Not ever. Someone in the kitchen brought out a plate. Chicken strips, mashed potatoes, a bread roll, a small carton of apple juice. They set it on a table near the stage. Maddie stared at it for 11 seconds. Ryder counted. Before she sat down and began eating with the controlled, methodical precision of someone who had learned to eat slowly because they never knew when the next meal would come. The room watched in silence. 150 people watching a child eat, and every single one of them understood that they were witnessing something that should never have existed. Lena sat down next to Ryder at the edge of the stage. Her left hand was shaking worse than usual. "I'm calling CPS tonight," she said quietly. "Already got Banks pulling the number." "This isn't a one-call situation, Ryder." "I know." He watched Maddie eat. She didn't look up. She didn't look at anyone. She ate like a machine running a program, each bite measured, each swallow deliberate, the bread roll broken into 4 equal pieces and consumed in order. It was the behavior of a child who'd been starved systematically. Not once, not accidentally, but as a strategy. "What's the stepfather's name?" Ryder asked. "We don't know yet. Find out." The call to Child Protective Services went out at 9:47 p.m. Lena made it from the office behind the bar, sitting on a metal folding chair with her boots on the desk and a cigarette burning between her fingers that she never actually smoked. She just held it. The ember was company. The woman on the other end of the line was professional, sympathetic, and utterly bound by procedure. Yes, a case would be opened. Yes, a social worker would be assigned. Timeline? 72 hours for initial assessment, assuming the case met priority criteria. If the child was not in immediate physical danger at this moment, the process would follow standard protocol. "She told a room full of people she eats once a week," Lena said, her voice flat. "I understand your concern, ma'am. We take all reports very seriously. She weighs maybe 40 pounds. She flinches when adults move near her. A caseworker will be assigned as soon as possible." Lena hung up. She sat in the dark office for 2 minutes, listening to the muffled sound of the bar through the wall, and then she stood up and walked back out. 72 hours, she told Ryder. His jaw tightened. That was all. No explosion, no table-flipping rage. Just a jaw muscle flexing under scar tissue and a pair of eyes that went somewhere cold and precise. The same place they'd gone every time a mission brief landed with bad intel and worse odds. "Where is she now?" "Deacon's sitting with her. She won't talk to anyone else." "She say anything about where she lives?" "Pinewood Terrace, the subdivision off Route 9. Ryder knew it. Upper middle-class development. New builds, manicured lawns, 2-car garages, the kind of neighborhood that existed specifically to project the illusion that nothing bad could happen inside its walls. The kind of place where people called the police on unfamiliar cars, but never noticed a child starving behind closed blinds. "The stepfather's name is Travis Boone," Banks said, appearing at Ryder's shoulder with a phone in his hand. Banks was the club's intelligence guy, a former signals analyst with the NSA who'd left the agency after something he wouldn't discuss and now ran a small IT repair shop on 3rd Street. Married Maddie's mother, Sarah Harper, 3 years ago. Sarah died 14 months later. Car accident, single vehicle. Toxicology came back clean. Ryder looked at him. Ruling was accidental. "And you believe that?" Banks didn't answer, which was an answer. Travis got default custody of Maddie after Sarah died. No biological father in the picture. Birth certificate lists the father as unknown. No living grandparents. Travis is Maddie's only legal guardian. The weight of that sentence settled across Ryder's shoulders like a physical load. A child with no biological safety net, locked inside a house, with a man who rationed food as punishment, and the only system designed to protect her was operating on a 72-hour timeline while a thunderstorm raged outside, and an 8-year-old sat in a biker bar eating chicken strips like they were oxygen. "I want everything on Travis Boone," Ryder said. "Employment, financials, social media, neighbors, parking tickets, everything. Already started. And Lena, get the school, find out who her teacher is, find out if anyone there has seen anything." Lena nodded and disappeared back toward the office. Ryder walked through the bar toward the corner where Deacon sat with Maddie. The room had settled into a strange, heavy quiet. People talking in low voices, nobody laughing, the jukebox turned off. The fundraiser was over in every way that mattered. What remained was a room full of people who didn't know what to do with the feeling lodged in their throats. Deacon looked up when Ryder approached. Deacon was 56, wiry, with a silver beard and forearms covered in tattoos that mapped the story of a man who'd lived 3 separate lives and survived all of them through sheer stubbornness. He'd been sitting 4 feet from Maddie, not talking, just present, the way a guard dog sits near a child, not performing protection, but simply being it. "She ate everything," Deacon said quietly. Ryder crouched down, not too close. He'd learned in Iraq that distance was a gift you gave to people who'd been hurt. "Maddie." She looked at him. Her eyes were clearer now. The food had done something, given her some ground to stand on, but the fear was still there, layered underneath like geological strata. "You're not going back to that house tonight," Ryder said. For the first time, something moved behind her face. Not hope. Hope was too advanced for a kid who'd been taught that survival was conditional. Something more primitive. Relief, maybe. The kind that animals show when the trap opens. "He'll be mad," she whispered. "Let him. You don't know what he's like." Ryder held her gaze. "I've met a lot of men like him, Maddie. They all think they're the scariest thing in the room. They're wrong." The rain continued its assault against the building. Someone brought a blanket from the back. An old military surplus wool thing that smelled like storage and engine oil. And Maddie wrapped it around herself without being told, pulling it up to her chin and tucking her feet underneath her on the chair. Within 20 minutes, she was asleep. Ryder stood and looked at Deacon. "Watch her." Wasn't planning on doing anything else. He walked outside into the storm. The rain hit him like a wall, soaking through his shirt in seconds, but he stood on the concrete step and stared at the dark parking lot without flinching. Lightning bleached the sky white. Thunder rolled across the low hills east of town like artillery fire from a war that had never technically ended. His phone buzzed. "Banks. Ryder, I pulled the school records. Maddie Harper has missed 31 days this academic year. The school sent notices. Travis signed a form saying she had chronic health issues. Doctor's notes attached." "Forged?" "The doctor listed doesn't exist. The medical practice address is a UPS store." Ryder closed his eyes. The rain ran down his face like something trying to clean him and failing. "There's more," Banks continued. "I talked to a woman named Gloria Vance. Lives 2 doors down from the Boone house. She says she's called the police 3 times in the past year. Noise complaints, a kid crying at night, once because she saw Maddie sitting on the back porch at 2 in the morning in January, wearing a t-shirt, 30-degree weather." "And?" "Officers responded. Travis answered the door every time. Cooperative, polite, concerned citizen. Told them Maddie had night terrors and behavioral issues from the trauma of losing her mother. They left." "Every time?" "Every time. The system, the beautiful bureaucratic slow-moving system that was designed to protect children like Maddie, and instead functioned as a series of locked doors that men like Travis Boone knew exactly how to navigate. Ryder had seen it overseas, but the way power didn't need to be violent to be absolute. It just needed to be patient. It just needed to know which forms to fill out, which stories to tell, which faces to wear in front of which people. He went back inside. The bar was emptying. Families with kids had left first, then the casual drinkers, then the people who wanted to help but didn't know how. What remained were the Steel Guardians and a handful of civilians who'd decided that leaving felt wrong. Ryder stood in front of his club. "This is not a club matter," he said. "I'm not ordering anyone to do anything. This girl walked into our house and told us she's starving. CPS has a 72-hour window. I'm not waiting 72 hours. If you want to walk away, walk away. Nobody here will judge you." Nobody walked away. "What's the play?" Grit asked. First words he'd spoken all night. "We document. We build a case so airtight that when CPS shows up, there's nowhere for Travis Boone to hide. We talk to teachers, neighbors, medical professionals, anyone who's seen anything. We create a paper trail that the system can't ignore." "And if Travis runs?" Lena asked. The question hung in the air like cigarette smoke. "Then we make sure he doesn't get far." By midnight, the Steel Guardians had divided into teams. Banks ran information from his laptop in the back office. pulling public records, cross-referencing addresses, mapping Travis Boone's life with the meticulous precision of a man who'd once tracked foreign intelligence operatives for a living. Lena worked the phones, reaching out to contacts at the county hospital and the local school district. Grit and two other members drove to Pinewood Terrace and parked across the street from the Boone house, engines off, lights off, sitting in the rain like sentinels carved from stone. At 1:15 a.m., the light in the Boone house's upstairs window turned off. At 1:22 a.m., Grit sent a text to Ryder. House dark, single vehicle in driveway, no movement. At 1:30 a.m., a second text. He hasn't noticed she's gone. That sentence hit Ryder like a bullet he didn't see coming. An 8-year-old had walked out of a house in a thunderstorm, traveled an unknown distance to a bar full of strangers, and her legal guardian hadn't even noticed. Either Travis Boone didn't know his stepdaughter was missing, or he didn't care. Both possibilities were weapons pointed at the same target. Maddie slept in the corner of the iron bell like a small animal that had found a warm place and was afraid to move. Deacon sat 3 feet away, his eyes open, his breathing steady, his entire body a perimeter. At one point, Maddie stirred and made a sound. Not a word, not a cry, something lower and more guttural, the sound of a child revisiting something in her sleep that she couldn't escape while awake. Deacon didn't move. He just existed. He was good at that. The morning came gray and heavy, the storm having retreated to a low, persistent drizzle that turned everything the color of old concrete. Maddie woke at 6:04 a.m., sat up with the rigid alertness of someone conditioned to be awake before punishment arrived, and looked around the room with those 2 large eyes until she found Deacon still sitting in his chair. "You stayed," she said. It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a child recalibrating her understanding of what adults were capable of. "Wasn't going anywhere," Deacon said. Ryder arrived at 6:30 with 2 bags of groceries from the 24-hour gas station on Route 7. Not because the food was good, but because it was open. He set a carton of orange juice, a package of mini muffins, and a banana in front of Maddie without ceremony. She stared at the food the same way she'd stared at the plate the night before. 11 seconds of disbelief before her hands moved. "Maddie," Ryder said, sitting across from her, "I need to ask you some questions. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to, but the more you tell me, the more I can help." She peeled the banana with mechanical precision. "He's going to find me." "Not today. You don't know him." "I know enough." She took a bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. "He locks the pantry," she said. "There's a padlock, silver. He keeps the key on his keychain. On Sundays he opens it and lets me eat 1 meal. He sits and watches. He times me. If I eat too slow, he takes it away. If I eat too fast, he says I'm being greedy and takes it away." The orange juice sat untouched. She was talking now, and the words were coming out with the flat, recitative quality of testimony. A child who had rehearsed this truth so many times in her own head that the horror had been compressed into data. "What about school?" Ryder asked. "He packs me a lunch sometimes, a granola bar and a water bottle. But some weeks he doesn't. He says if I tell anyone, he'll send me somewhere worse." "Worse than what?" "Worse than him." Ryder's hands rested flat on the table. His knuckles were white. He breathed in through his nose and held it for 3 seconds, the way his VA therapist had taught him before he'd stopped going to the VA therapist because the waiting room smelled like panic and fluorescent lights made his head feel like it was full of bees. "Your mom," he said carefully. "Can you tell me about her?" Maddie stopped chewing. The flat affect cracked, and underneath it was something raw and terrible. Grief so deep it had its own gravity. "She was nice," Maddie said. Then, quieter. "He wasn't like this when she was alive." "What changed?" "Everything." The door to the iron bell opened. Lena walked in with her phone pressed to her ear, her face set in the expression Ryder had learned to read as barely controlled fury. She hung up, crossed the room, and leaned close to Ryder's ear. "Travis Boone just called the Harlan County Sheriff's Department and reported Maddie as a runaway. He told them she's mentally unstable, that she has a history of making up stories for attention, and that she needs her medication." "What medication?" "He didn't specify, but he's already building a narrative, Ryder. He's framing this. The second the cops find her here, it's his word against an 8-year-old's, and he's got 3 years of documentation on his side. Doctor's notes, school forms, concerned parent paperwork. All fake, but it looks real. Ryder stood. He walked to the back of the bar where nobody could hear him, pressed both palms against the wall, and breathed. Travis Boone wasn't a reckless monster. He was a calculated one. The kind who built systems around his cruelty the way engineers build scaffolding. Methodical, redundant, designed to bear weight. He'd anticipated this moment. He'd prepared for the possibility that Maddie would talk, and he'd constructed a counter-narrative so thorough that the burden of proof would fall on a terrified child against a wall of forged paperwork. Ryder's phone buzzed. A text from Grit, who was still parked outside the Boone house. He just left, headed east on Route 9, driving fast. Then 12 seconds later, he's coming your way. Ryder looked across the room at Maddie, who was holding her banana with both hands and staring at the front door of the Iron Bell with an expression he'd seen on the faces of soldiers who'd heard incoming mortar fire. She already knew. The sound of tires on wet gravel reached them 30 seconds before the headlights appeared through the rain-streaked windows. Travis Boone was here. The truck was a black Ford F250 with mud on the wheel wells and a cracked windshield that caught the gray morning light like a scar. It pulled into the Iron Bell's gravel lot too fast, tires throwing water, and stopped at an angle that blocked the front entrance. The engine idled for 15 seconds before it shut off. In those 15 seconds, every steel guardian in the building moved. Grit was already through the back door, circling the building's east side, his massive frame disappearing into the drizzle like something that shouldn't be able to vanish, but did. Lena positioned herself between Maddie and the front windows, not dramatically, just a casual shift of weight that put her body in the line of sight. Deacon hadn't moved from his chair, but his hand had dropped below the table to rest on his knee. A stillness so complete it generated its own kind of noise. Ryder walked to the front door and opened it before Travis Boone could knock. The man on the other side was not what most people expected when they heard the word abuser. Travis Boone was 41, clean-shaven, wearing a navy blue North Face jacket over a pressed button-down shirt. His hair was neatly parted. His shoes were clean despite the rain. He had the kind of face that PTA meetings and neighborhood watch committees trusted instinctively. Symmetrical, earnest, touched with just enough concern to make him look like a worried parent and not a man who padlocked food away from a child. "I'm looking for my daughter," Travis said. His voice was measured, controlled, the voice of a man who had practiced this moment. Ryder filled the door frame. He didn't step aside. He didn't extend a hand. He stood there with his arms loose and his weight centered and his scarred face arranged into nothing. No anger, no threat, just the absolute absence of welcome. "Stepdaughter," Ryder said. Travis blinked. A micro-adjustment, the kind most people wouldn't catch. But Ryder had spent years reading faces through rifle scopes and across interrogation tables, and he saw it, the fraction of a second where Travis recalculated. "Maddie is my daughter in every way that matters," Travis said, and the smoothness of the recovery was its own kind of evidence. "She's been having a difficult time since her mother passed. She has episodes, dissociative behavior, wandering. Her therapist and I have been working on it. I just need to take her home." "What's the therapist's name?" Another blink, faster this time. "Dr. Paulson. She's with the Ridgeview Behavioral Center." "Ridgeview closed 8 months ago," Banks said from somewhere behind Ryder's left shoulder, his voice flat as a dial tone. "And there's no licensed therapist named Paulson in Harlan County. I checked." Travis's eyes moved past Ryder into the bar, scanning, looking for Maddie. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a tightening across the shoulders, a subtle forward lean, the body language of a man whose script had just been challenged and who was deciding whether to improvise or escalate. "I don't know who you people are," Travis said, and now there was an edge in his voice, thin and sharp like a blade hidden in cotton. "But I have legal custody of that child. I've already filed a report with the sheriff's department. If you're harboring a minor without parental consent, that's a criminal matter." "She walked in on her own," Ryder said. "She's 8. She doesn't get to make decisions about where she goes." "She told a room full of people you starve her." The words landed like a slap. Travis's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: shock, wounded disbelief, and then a careful, manufactured sadness that he assembled like a mask being pulled from a drawer. "She says things like that," Travis said softly. "It's part of her condition. Her mother's death traumatized her profoundly. She creates narratives, attention-seeking behavior. Her doctors have documented it extensively." "Her fake doctors," Banks said. "I beg your pardon?" "The physician listed on her school absence forms doesn't exist. The medical practice address is a UPS store on 4th and Main. We verified it last night." Something moved behind Travis Boone's eyes. Not panic. He was too disciplined for panic. But recognition. The recognition of a man who had built a careful house of lies and was now standing in front of people who'd already started pulling out the foundation stones. He straightened. The concerned parent mask stayed in place, but the voice dropped half a register. "I'm going to ask one more time. Where is my stepdaughter?" "She's eating breakfast," Ryder said. "Something she apparently doesn't get to do at your house." "You have no right." "Travis," Ryder said the name like it tasted wrong. "Go home. A social worker will be in contact within 72 hours. If you have documentation to support your version of events, I'm sure the county will review it thoroughly." "You think I'm afraid of a social worker?" "I think you should be afraid of a lot of things right now. A social worker is just the beginning." They stood 3 feet apart in the doorway of the Iron Bell, rain dripping off the awning between them, and for a moment the pretense fell away. No concerned parent, no reasonable citizen, just 2 men staring at each other across a threshold with a child's life hanging in the space between them. Travis's pupils contracted, his jaw set, and Ryder saw it. The real man underneath the pressed shirt, cold, calculating, furious not because he'd been caught, but because someone had dared to interfere. "This isn't over," Travis said. "No," Ryder agreed. "It isn't." Travis turned and walked back to his truck. He didn't hurry. He moved with the deliberate pace of a man making a point. "I'm leaving because I choose to, not because you made me." The F-250's engine turned over, and the truck reversed out of the lot and disappeared east on Route 9, its taillights bleeding red through the rain until they were gone. Ryder stood in the doorway for another full minute, watching the empty road, before he turned back inside. "He'll lawyer up within the hour," Lena said. "I know. And the sheriff's going to show up here wanting to know why we have someone else's kid." "I know." "Ryder, we have to play this right. If we push too hard, we give him the narrative he wants. Outlaw bikers kidnapping a child from a loving home. The media writes itself." He knew that too, every word of it. The system wasn't designed to believe people who looked like them. A motorcycle club with skull patches and criminal-adjacent aesthetics versus a clean-cut suburban stepfather with a filing cabinet full of fabricated medical records. The optics were a weapon Travis Boone didn't even have to aim. Ryder sat down at the bar and poured a coffee from the pot Lena had started 20 minutes ago. The coffee was bitter and burnt and exactly the temperature of something that had stopped caring about being good. He drank it black. "Where's Maddie?" Deacon took her to the back room. She wanted to draw. "She say anything else?" Lena sat on the stool next to him and placed her phone face down on the bar. Her left hand was shaking again, worse than usual. She pressed it flat against the wood to make it stop. "She said there's a closet," Lena said quietly. "Under the stairs. That's where he puts her when she cries. She said sometimes she sleeps there for 2 or 3 days. She said there's a lock on the outside." Ryder's coffee mug stopped midway to his mouth. He set it down very carefully, the way a man handles something when his hands want to break it. "She said it so casually, Ryder, like she was describing her bedroom, like sleeping in a locked closet is just what happens. She doesn't even know it's wrong." The back door opened and Grit came in, water streaming from his beard, his size 15 boots leaving puddles on the floor. He walked to Ryder without preamble. Followed him to the county road. He didn't go home. He turned north on Highway 11. "North? Where's north take him?" "Braddock, the courthouse, and the law office of Dean Whitfield." Banks looked up from his laptop in the corner. "Whitfield's a defense attorney. High dollar. Represented 2 DUI dismissals for a county commissioner last year and got a landlord off an eviction fraud charge. He's connected. So Travis has money, Lena said, or access to it. The house on Pinewood Terrace is valued at $420. Mortgage is current. 2 vehicles registered in his name. He works as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company. Base salary plus commission. On paper, he looks solid. On paper, he looks perfect, Ryder said. That's the whole point. The morning aged into a pale, exhausted afternoon. The drizzle stopped, but the sky stayed low and gray, pressing down on Harlan County like a hand on a chest. Ryder worked the phones from the bar, while Lena coordinated with 2 steel guardians stationed outside the school Maddie attended. Roosevelt Elementary, a flat brick building on the south side of town where the playground equipment was rusted and the budget was a punchline. The school principal, a woman named Dorothy Kessler, returned Lena's call at 11:40 a.m. She was guarded at first, institutional instinct, the voice of someone trained to protect the school before the students. But when Lena mentioned Maddie's name, the guard dropped. "I've been worried about that child for 2 years, Kessler said. "Then why didn't you do something?" "We did. We filed 3 reports with CPS. Each one was investigated. Each time Mr. Boone cooperated fully, provided documentation, and the case was closed. The system worked exactly the way it's designed to work. It just didn't work for Maddie." Lena wrote down names. Kessler gave her a teacher, Mrs. Gaines, 4th grade, a school counselor, Patrick Brennan, and a nurse, Rita Okafor, who had documented Maddie's weight loss across 4 consecutive school physicals and flagged it every single time. "Every flag got buried," Kessler said. "Not maliciously, just, there are 400 kids in this school and 12 staff members and a budget that gets cut every year. Things fall through cracks. Children fall through cracks." "This child didn't fall," Lena said. "She was pushed." Silence on the line. Then Kessler's voice, smaller now. "I know, but such sheets." By early afternoon, the Steel Guardians had assembled a dossier. Banks printed it on the Iron Bell's ancient inkjet printer. 23 pages of documentation, timelines, photographs of forged medical records, statements from the school, the neighbor Gloria Vance's testimony, and a detailed log of every interaction Maddie had described inside the Boone household. It wasn't a legal filing, it was a weapon. Ryder spread it across the pool table and stood over it with Lena, Grit, Banks, and Deacon. The green felt under the papers looked like a surgical field. "This goes to CPS tomorrow morning," Ryder said. "In person, hand-delivered. We don't trust email, we don't trust fax, we don't leave room for it to get lost in a queue." "And if they still drag their feet?" Deacon asked. "Then it goes to the county DA. And if the DA sits on it? Then it goes to the press." Lena shook her head slowly. "Ryder, the second this goes public, Travis flips the narrative. Biker gang harasses single father. We're not the heroes in that headline." "I don't care about headlines." "You should, because headlines determine who gets custody and who gets a prison sentence. If we look like vigilantes, Maddie ends up back in that house, and we end up with a restraining order." The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when 2 people who trust each other disagree on something that matters more than trust. "She's right," Grit said. Every head turned. Grit speaking twice in 24 hours was unprecedented. "We push too hard, too fast. Travis buries us in legal motions and paints us as the threat. We need the system to work, which means we need to feed the system better ammunition than he can." Ryder stared at the papers on the pool table. 23 pages. 31 missed school days. 3 ignored CPS reports. A child who slept in a closet and ate once a week and had never once been believed by the institutions designed to believe her. "Fine," he said. "We do it clean. But I want eyes on that house 24 hours a day until CPS moves. Rotating shifts. 2 bikes minimum. If Travis Boone so much as loads a suitcase into that truck, I want to know about it before the zipper closes." The afternoon fractured into a series of small, precise actions. Hatchet and Rooster took the first surveillance shift at Pinewood Terrace, parking their bikes behind a landscaping truck on the adjacent street where they could see the Boone driveway without being seen. Banks continued pulling records, financial transactions, phone logs, anything publicly accessible that might reveal the architecture of Travis Boone's carefully constructed life. Mercy, the club's youngest patched member, a 28-year-old former Marine with a psychology degree she'd earned on a GI Bill and a face full of freckles that made her look like a college student, sat with Maddie in the back room and drew pictures. Not interrogation, not therapy, just presence. The slow, patient work of letting a child understand that silence could be safe instead of punishing. At 2:15 p.m., Maddie drew a picture of a house. It was black. All of it. Walls, roof, windows, door. Black crayon pressed so hard into the paper that it tore in two places. Inside the house, she drew a single stick figure lying on the floor of a small square room with no windows. "That's the closet," she said, and kept drawing. Mercy's face didn't change. She'd learned that trick in Helmand Province, where showing emotion to a frightened child could be interpreted as danger. She just nodded and said, "Can you draw me a picture of something you like?" Maddie thought about it. Then she drew a motorcycle. It was crude. 2 circles and a triangle, and something that might have been handlebars, but it was drawn in yellow crayon, the brightest color in the box, and she pressed lighter this time, the lines gentle instead of angry. Mercy brought the drawing to Ryder. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he folded it once and put it in the inside pocket of his cut, next to the photograph of 3 men in desert camouflage that he'd carried since 2006 and never shown anyone. The sheriff arrived at 3:47 p.m. Deputy Kyle Engstrom pulled into the Iron Bells lot in a Harlan County cruiser, alone, which was either a good sign or a sign that the department didn't take this seriously enough to send 2 people. Engstrom was 35, lean, with a military-style haircut and the careful, apologetic expression of a man who knew he was about to be stuck between 2 forces larger than his pay grade. Ryder. Kyle. They knew each other. Small town. Everyone knew everyone. Engstrom had grown up 3 streets from Ryder's childhood home, had attended Ryder's mother's funeral 6 years ago, and occasionally came to the Iron Bell for a beer on Friday nights when he wasn't on shift. He was not a bad cop. He was not a good cop. He was a cop, which meant he was a servant of a system that functioned on paperwork and precedent. "I have a complaint from Travis Boone stating that his stepdaughter is being held here against his will. She walked in under her own power during a public event. She disclosed abuse. We reported it to CPS. CPS confirmed the report. They also confirmed that Travis Boone has legal custody and that the child should be returned to his care pending investigation." The sentence landed like a grenade with the pin pulled. "Returned," Lena repeated from behind Ryder, her voice stripped of everything except the word itself. "That's the protocol. The child is returned to the custodial parent unless there's an emergency removal order, which requires a judge. CPS is requesting an expedited hearing, but that's 48 hours minimum." 48 hours in a house with a padlocked pantry and a closet she sleeps in, Lena said. Engstrom's jaw tightened. "I don't like it either." "Then don't do it." "It's not my call, Lena. If I refuse to return the child, I'm in violation of a direct order. Boone's attorney files a motion against the department, and this becomes a story about law enforcement overreach instead of child abuse. The judge throws out the CPS case on procedural grounds, and Maddie ends up back there anyway. Except now the one legal path to getting her out has been destroyed." The logic was impeccable. That was the worst part. Every word Engstrom said was correct, and every word of it was a death sentence delivered in reasonable language. Ryder looked at the deputy for a long time. Rain began again, light and persistent, tapping against the cruiser's roof in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. "Give us an hour," Ryder said. "Ryder, 1 hour. You can wait in your car. Drink your coffee. 1 hour." Engstrom looked at the building, then at the line of motorcycles along the wall, then at Ryder's face. Whatever he saw there, and Ryder wasn't sure himself what was showing, it made the deputy nod once and walk back to his cruiser. Ryder went inside and found Maddie in the back room. She was sitting on the floor with Mercy, surrounded by crayon drawings, and when Ryder appeared in the doorway, she looked up with an expression that cut him in half. Because she already knew. Kids always knew. They could hear the future in the footsteps of the adults around them. "I have to go back," she said. It wasn't a question. Ryder knelt. His knees protested. Old injuries, old shrapnel, old wars. He knelt anyway, because standing over a frightened child was something Travis Boone did, and Ryder would break his own legs before he resembled that man in any way. Listen to me. We are going to get you out. Not someday, not eventually, soon. But right now the law says you have to go back. And if we fight the law today, we lose the chance to fight it right. He's going to be so angry. I know. He doesn't hit me. He just stops. Everything stops. The food stops. The talking stops. I become invisible. Ryder's vision blurred. He blinked it clear. Soldiers don't cry in front of people they're protecting. It's not a rule. It's architecture. Maddie, look at me. She did. Those enormous ancient eyes. You're not invisible. You were never invisible. And we are not going away. There will be people watching your house every hour of every day until this is over. If anything happens, anything, you find a way to a window and you wave. That's all you have to do. Wave. And we will be there. She looked at him for a long time. Then she reached into the pile of drawings and pulled out the yellow motorcycle. She held it out to him. You keep it. I already have it. He touched the pocket of his cut. Right here. The hour expired. Engstrom came to the door. Ryder carried Maddie's backpack. Lena walked beside the girl, not touching her, just close. A human shield that couldn't protect against the thing they were sending her back to. At the cruiser, Maddie turned around. She looked at the iron bell, at the motorcycles, at the cluster of bikers standing in the light rain watching her with the collective focus of a battalion before deployment. She didn't wave, she didn't cry, she just looked. Then she got in the car and Engstrom drove her east on Route 9, toward Pinewood Terrace, toward the house with the padlocked pantry and the closet under the stairs and the man who would be waiting with a patience that was worse than any violence. Ryder stood in the parking lot until the cruiser's taillights vanished. The rain soaked through his shirt. Lena stood next to him, her left hand shaking, her right hand clenched. We just sent her back, she said. I know. If something happens to her tonight, nothing is going to happen to her tonight. You don't know that. Well, he didn't. He didn't know that at all. And the not knowing was a species of pain that had no medication, no coping mechanism, no tactical solution. It just sat in his chest like a stone dropped into a well, falling and never hitting bottom. Grit, Ryder said into his phone. You and Hatchet are on the Boone house. Do not leave. Do not sleep. If a single light turns on in that house before morning, I want a call. Copy. And Grit. If she waves, you call me first and break down the door second. A pause. Then Grit's voice low and certain. Won't need to break it down. Won't be locked long enough. The night came heavy and moonless. The Steel Guardians rotated surveillance in 4-hour shifts, 2 members at all times, parked on the adjacent street with a clear line to the Boone house's front and side windows. Banks monitored Travis Boone's digital footprint from the iron bell, tracking credit card activity, cell phone tower pings, and email metadata that he accessed through methods Ryder didn't ask about because the answers would have required a conversation about legality that neither of them wanted to have. At 8:14 p.m., the kitchen light in the Boone house turned on. At 8:16 p.m., it turned off. At 8:22 p.m., the upstairs hallway light turned on, stayed on for 7 minutes, turned off. At 9:01 p.m., every light in the house went dark. No one waved from any window. Ryder sat at the bar in the Iron Bell, alone, surrounded by the ghosts of a fundraiser that had become a battlefield, and stared at his phone like it was an IED he couldn't defuse. Lena had gone home to sleep for 2 hours. Deacon had taken a post at the east end of Pinewood Terrace as a third overwatch position. Banks was asleep on the office floor with his laptop open and 3 empty energy drink cans forming a perimeter around his head. At 11:45 p.m., Ryder's phone rang. Not a text, a call. From a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Mr. Kane. The voice was male, professional, detached. My name is Dean Whitfield. I represent Travis Boone. I'm calling to inform you that my client has filed a restraining order against you, your motorcycle club, and any affiliated individuals. The order will be processed by Judge Raymond Hale tomorrow morning. Effective immediately upon issuance, you and your associates are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Mr. Boone, his residence, or his stepdaughter. Ryder's hand tightened on the phone. Furthermore, My client is pursuing an emergency custody affirmation hearing to prevent any future interference with his parental rights. He has also filed a formal complaint with the Harlan County Sheriff's Department alleging harassment, intimidation, and unlawful detention of a minor. The line was silent for 3 seconds. Mr. Kane, I'll be direct. My client is a grieving widower raising a traumatized child. Your organization's involvement has been, and I'm being generous here, unhelpful. If you continue to interfere, I will ensure that every legal instrument available is used to protect my client's family. Do we understand each other? Ryder stood in the dark bar, phone pressed to his ear, and felt the walls closing in. Not on him, but on Maddie. Every legal door slamming shut, every systemic exit being bricked over by a man with a good attorney and a filing cabinet full of lies. Mr. Kane? I understand you perfectly, Mr. Whitfield. He hung up. He set the phone on the bar. He picked up his cold coffee and drank it, tasting nothing. Then he pulled out the folded yellow drawing from his cut and looked at it under the buzzing neon of the bar sign. A motorcycle, bright yellow, drawn by a girl who weighed 43 pounds and knew what it meant to be invisible. He pulled out his phone again and dialed. Lena, wake up. He's filing a restraining order. 500 feet. If it goes through tomorrow, we can't even park on the same street. Silence. Then Lena's voice, thick with interrupted sleep but already sharpening. Then we have until tomorrow morning to make our move. Exactly. What kind of move? Ryder stared at the drawing, the yellow crayon lines, the wheels that were just circles, the hope that was just a child's hand pressing color into paper. The kind we can't take back. They had 6 hours before the courthouse opened. Ryder stood in the Iron Bell's back office at 12:17 a.m. with a map of Harlan County spread across the desk and his phone on speaker. Lena was on the other end, her voice stripped of sleep and operating on something raw. The frequency soldiers tune into when the mission window is closing and every second costs something you can't get back. The restraining order goes before Judge Hale at 9, she said. Whitfield filed it as an emergency motion. If Hale signs it, we're done. 500 feet. We can't watch the house, we can't contact the school, we can't go near Maddie. Then we make sure CPS has everything they need before 9. CPS doesn't open until 8:30. Then we're at the door at 8:30. With what? 23 pages of documentation that a good attorney can dismiss as hearsay from a motorcycle club with a grudge? Ryder, we need something the system can't ignore. Physical evidence, medical records, something with a seal on it. Ryder's eyes moved across the map without seeing it. His mind was somewhere else, in the architecture of Travis Boone's lie, searching for the load-bearing wall, the single structural element whose removal would bring the whole thing down. The school nurse, he said. Rita Okafor. She documented Maddie's weight loss across 4 physicals. That's medical data generated within an institutional setting. It carries more weight than anything we put together. It's the middle of the night, Ryder. Find her. Lena found her. It took 3 calls. One to Principal Kessler, who answered on the first ring because she hadn't slept either. One to a mutual contact at the county health department, and one to Rita Okafor herself, who picked up at 1:04 a.m. and said, I've been waiting for this call for 2 years. Rita Okafor lived in a small ranch house on the west side of town, and by 2 a.m., Lena was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she didn't drink and a stack of photocopied medical records that Rita had kept in a locked drawer in her bedroom because she didn't trust the school's filing system not to lose them. 4 consecutive physicals, Rita said. She was a compact woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the steady, unsurprised demeanor of someone who had spent decades watching systems fail children. Maddie lost 11 pounds between her first and fourth weigh-in, 11 pounds on a child who was already underweight. I flagged it every time. I sent reports to the principal, to the district office, to CPS. And CPS sent an investigator. The investigator visited the home. Travis Boone showed her a full refrigerator and a pantry stocked with food. He said Maddie was a picky eater and that he was working with her pediatrician to address it. The investigator closed the case. The pediatrician who doesn't exist. I didn't know that then. I just knew something was wrong and nobody was listening. Lena spread the records across the table. Dates, weights, notes in Rita's precise handwriting. A paper trail that documented a child's body disappearing 1 pound at a time while the adults around her followed protocol and checked boxes and filed reports that went nowhere. "This is what we need," Lena said. "But I need you to do something, Rita. I need you to come with me to CPS at 8:30 and present this yourself, in person, as a medical professional attached to the school district." Rita took off her glasses and cleaned them with the hem of her nightgown. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were not. "I could lose my job," she said. "Maddie could lose her life." The silence between them lasted 4 seconds. Then Rita put her glasses back on and said, "I'll be ready at 8. Back at the Iron Bell, the night was decomposing into something gray and formless. Banks hadn't moved from the office floor, but his laptop screen was still glowing, and at 3:20 a.m. he sat up suddenly with the rigid alertness of a man whose subconscious had been processing data while his body pretended to rest. "Ryder." Ryder appeared in the doorway. He hadn't slept. His eyes were ringed with shadow, and his coffee mug was on its 4th refill, each one colder and more bitter than the last, as if the machine itself was losing patience. "I found something," Banks said. "Travis Boone's financial records. The house, the truck, the lifestyle. None of it makes sense on a regional sales manager's salary. He's pulling in maybe $75,000–$80,000 a year. The mortgage alone is $2,400 a month. 2 vehicles, insurance, property taxes. He should be stretched thin." But he's not. No, because there's a second income stream. Sarah Harper, Maddie's mother, had a life insurance policy. $250,000. Beneficiary was originally listed as Maddie Harper, held in trust until she turned 18. Ryder's hand tightened on the doorframe. 3 months before Sarah died, the beneficiary was changed. New beneficiary, Travis Boone, direct payout, no trust, no contingencies. The room shrank. The air thickened. Ryder felt the information settle into his body like shrapnel. Not the kind that kills you instantly, but the kind that lodges deep and shifts every time you breathe. "He changed the insurance before she died," Ryder said. 3 months before. The policy modification was filed electronically. Sarah's signature is on the form, but Sarah might not have signed it. Banks turned the laptop to face Ryder. On the screen was a scanned document, a life insurance beneficiary change form dated 14 months before the present, bearing a signature that looked rushed and uneven, the handwriting of someone who either didn't care about penmanship or didn't know what they were signing. "I cross-referenced it with Sarah's signature on Maddie's birth certificate and on the mortgage application for the Pinewood Terrace house," Banks said. "The birth certificate signature is clean, consistent, natural. The mortgage signature matches. The insurance form signature," he pulled up a side-by-side comparison, "doesn't." Ryder stared at the screen. 2 signatures. One real, one wrong. The difference was subtle. A slight variation in the baseline, a loop on the S that tilted the wrong direction, a pressure inconsistency that suggested the hand holding the pen was imitating rather than owning the motion. "He forged it," Ryder said. "That's not a conclusion I can prove from a laptop in the back of a bar at 3 a.m, but it's a conclusion that a forensic document examiner could prove in about 48 hours. And the car accident, Sarah's accident." Banks was quiet for a moment, the quiet of a man standing at the edge of something he wasn't sure he wanted to look into. "Single vehicle," he said. "Wet road. Car left the highway and struck a concrete embankment at approximately 50 miles per hour. No witnesses. Toxicology was clean. The vehicle was a 2018 Honda Civic, one of the safest cars on the road. The investigation lasted 6 days. Ruling, accidental." "Who investigated?" "Harlan County Sheriff's Department. Lead investigator was Sergeant Michael Pruitt." "Where's Pruitt now?" "Retired. Moved to Florida 8 months ago." "Convenient." "Maybe. Or maybe a 58-year-old cop retired because he was tired. I don't have enough to say which." Ryder pushed off the doorframe and walked to the pool table where the dossier was still spread out. He stood over it, hands flat on the felt, head bowed, processing. The case had just shifted beneath his feet. What had started as a child abuse investigation was now something larger, something with roots that went deeper and darker than a padlocked pantry. If Travis Boone had forged the insurance documents, then the $250,000 payout was obtained through fraud. If he'd forged the documents before Sarah's death, and then Sarah had conveniently died in a single car accident on a wet road with no witnesses, the implication was a black hole, a gravity well that pulled everything toward a center too dark to name. "Banks," Ryder said without turning around. "The accident report. Is it accessible?" "Public record. I can have it by morning." "Get it, and find out if the Honda was ever examined by anyone other than the county." I think Travis Boone married a woman with a life insurance policy, changed the beneficiary to himself, and 3 months later she drove into a wall. And I think if we're right, then Maddie isn't just being abused by her stepfather. She's being kept alive by a man who killed her mother. The words hung in the air of the back office like something toxic, something that, once released, could not be contained or taken back. Banks stared at his laptop. Ryder stared at the pool table. Neither of them spoke for nearly a full minute. "If we're right," Banks finally said, "then this isn't a CPS case. This is a homicide. And Maddie is the only witness who was in that house before and after Sarah died. Which makes her a liability. Yes." Ryder pulled out his phone. "Grit. Status. All quiet. House dark since 9. No movement. Stay on it. Don't blink. Copy." He dialed Lena next. She answered from Rita Okafor's kitchen. "We have a problem," Ryder said. "Bigger than the one we already have?" Travis Boone may have killed Sarah Harper. The silence on Lena's end lasted 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, Ryder could hear a clock ticking in Rita Okafor's kitchen, and the sound of Lena's breathing changing, deepening, steadying, the way a medic's breathing changes when the wound they're looking at is worse than they expected. "Tell me everything," he told her. The insurance policy, the forged signature, the timeline, the single car accident, the retired investigator, every piece of it laid out in the flat, compressed language of a battlefield briefing. "We need to go to the police," Lena said. "With what? A signature comparison done by a former NSA analyst in the back of a bar? We have suspicion, Lena. We don't have evidence." "Then we get evidence." "How?" "We're getting a restraining order in 6 hours. After 9 a.m., we can't go near him, his house, or Maddie." "Then we go to the state police, skip Harlan County entirely. If there's a possibility that a county investigation was botched, or worse, buried, the state has jurisdiction. And the state police will want evidence before they open a cold case. The insurance documents are evidence. The forged signature is evidence. Rita's medical records are evidence of ongoing abuse that creates a pattern of behavior consistent with someone who views a child as disposable." Ryder leaned against the wall of the office. His body was shutting down, 41 hours without sleep, running on caffeine and adrenaline and the kind of rage that doesn't burn hot, but sits in the bones like a low-grade fever that never breaks. "Okay," he said. "Here's what we do. At 8:30, you and Rita go to CPS with the medical records. Push for an emergency removal order. At the same time, I take the financial documents to the state police barracks in Corbin. That's 40 minutes from here. I lay it out for whoever's on duty and request they reopen the accident investigation. That's 2 fronts at once. It's the only play. If CPS moves fast enough, Maddie gets pulled before the restraining order takes effect. If the state police bite, Travis is dealing with a homicide inquiry and the restraining order becomes the least of his problems. And if neither works, then we figure out Plan C." "What's Plan C?" "I don't know yet, but it exists. It has to." At 4:30 a.m., Ryder was standing outside the Iron Bell, alone, watching the eastern horizon begin to hemorrhage the first pale light of dawn. His boots were wet. His hands smelled like coffee and printer ink. The air was cold and tasted like rain that hadn't fallen yet. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I know you're watching the house." Ryder stared at the screen. The light from the phone illuminated his face from below, carving shadows under his eyes and along the scar on his jaw. Another text 10 seconds later. "I know everything you're doing. The school nurse, the insurance records, the state police play. You think I don't have eyes too?" Ryder's pulse didn't accelerate. It slowed. The paradoxical calm of a combat veteran whose nervous system had been rewired by years of incoming fire. When the threat materialized, everything got quieter. A third text. Maddie told me you promised she wasn't invisible. That was kind. But kindness doesn't win custody cases. Lawyers do, judges do, and I have both. Then a fourth, after a 20-second pause that felt like an hour. Back off, Mr. Kane, or I take the girl and disappear. You know I can. You know nobody will stop me in time, and you know what happens when she has no one watching. Ryder read the messages 3 times. Then he walked inside and set his phone on the bar in front of Banks, who had emerged from the office with a fresh energy drink and the haunted expression of a man who had been reading accident reports in the dark for 2 hours. Banks read the texts. He knows, Banks said. He has a source. Someone is feeding him information. Who? The question detonated inside the room. The Steel Guardians operated on a principle of absolute internal trust, the kind forged in combat, tested under fire, proven through years of shared sacrifice. The idea that someone inside the Brotherhood was communicating with Travis Boone was not just a tactical problem, it was an existential one. Think about it, Ryder said. He knows about Rita Okafor. He knows about the insurance records. He knows I'm planning to go to the state police. That information existed in this building and nowhere else. Lena, me, you, Grit, Deacon, Mercy, that's the circle. No. Banks's voice was hard. I'm not going there. We have to go there. These are people I've bled with, Ryder. Grit pulled me out of a burning Humvee in Tikrit. Deacon carried Lena 2 miles through hostile territory after the IED. Mercy. She's 28 years old, Ryder. She sat with that little girl and drew pictures. And someone in that circle sent 4 texts to Travis Boone at 4:30 in the morning. Banks sat down slowly. The energy drink trembled in his hand. Or someone's phone is compromised, he said. Or the school nurse talked to someone she shouldn't have. Or Travis has surveillance equipment we don't know about. Check all of it. Start now. The next 90 minutes were a controlled demolition of trust. Banks swept every phone in the building. His own first, then Ryder's, then the office landline. He checked for spyware, monitoring apps, cloned SIM cards. He found nothing. He called Rita Okafor and asked if she'd spoken to anyone since Lena left. She hadn't. He pulled cell tower data for the phones that had been in the Iron Bell during the past 12 hours and cross-referenced them against Travis Boone's known number. At 6:15 a.m., he found it. Deacon, Banks said. The name landed like a body hitting the floor. Deacon's phone pinged the same tower as Travis Boone's phone at 11:52 p.m. last night. That's 3 minutes before the first surveillance check-in from Grit. Deacon was supposed to be at the east end of Pinewood Terrace. The tower that pinged is 2 miles north of Pinewood Terrace, at the intersection of Highway 11 and County Road 4. What's at that intersection? A gas station, closed at night, empty parking lot. They met. The data says their phones were in the same location at the same time. It doesn't prove they met, but it strongly implies proximity. Ryder felt something inside him detach. Not break, not collapse, but deliberately disconnect, the way a surgeon disconnects emotion before cutting. Deacon. The man who'd sat 3 feet from Maddie all night, who'd watched her sleep, who'd been the first person she trusted in the building. The man Ryder had known for 11 years, who'd carried his brothers through combat zones and never once flinched. Get him in here, Ryder said. His voice was flat, surgical. They found Deacon at the east overwatch position on Pinewood Terrace, sitting on his motorcycle in the early morning fog, drinking from a thermos. He came willingly. He walked into the Iron Bell at 6:45 a.m. with his helmet under his arm and his silver beard damp with mist. And when he saw the faces waiting for him, Ryder, Banks, Lena, who had arrived 10 minutes earlier with Rita Okafor's documents in a manila folder, he stopped in the doorway. He knew. Men who've spent their lives reading rooms, soldiers, inmates, operatives, can feel the shift in atmosphere the way animals feel barometric pressure. Deacon stood in the doorway and felt it, and his face went through a transformation that Ryder watched with the detached precision of a man disarming and explosive. Sit down, Ryder said. Deacon sat at the bar. He set his thermos down. His hands were steady. His eyes moved between Ryder and Banks and Lena, measuring distances, calculating angles, the reflexes of a man who had spent a career in rooms where the wrong answer got people killed. Your phone pinged a tower at Highway 11 and County Road 4 at 11:52 last night, Ryder said. You were supposed to be at the Pinewood Overwatch. You weren't. Deacon didn't deny it. He didn't flinch. He sat on the bar stool and looked at Ryder with an expression that was worse than guilt. It was exhaustion. The exhaustion of a man carrying something he couldn't hold anymore. Travis Boone called me, Deacon said. When? Last night, around 11. I don't know how he got my number. What did he want? Deacon's hands wrapped around the thermos. His knuckles were white. He wanted to make a deal. The bar went silent. Not the productive silence of people thinking. The toxic silence of people trying not to react. He said he knows about the insurance investigation. He said if we back off, all of us, completely, he'll agree to a supervised custody arrangement. Maddie stays with him, but a social worker checks in monthly. He said it's the best deal we'll get, and if we push further, he'll take Maddie and vanish. And you believed him, Lena said. Her voice was ice on glass. I didn't believe him. I listened. There's a difference. The difference is about 4 texts that went to Ryder's phone at 4:30 in the morning, Banks said. Travis knew about the school nurse. He knew about the state police play. He knew things that were only discussed inside this building. Deacon closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. He asked me questions. I didn't think I was giving answers. He's good at this, Ryder. He talks like someone who's on your side. He frames everything as concern for Maddie. He said pushing too hard would traumatize her more. He said the legal fight would destroy her. He said, Deacon's voice cracked. He said the kindest thing we could do was let the system handle it. The system that's failed her for 3 years, Ryder said. I know. You sat next to that girl while she slept. You watched her eat for the first time in a week, and then you drove to a gas station parking lot and had a conversation with the man who starves her. I didn't tell him anything intentionally. Intent doesn't matter, Deacon. Result matters. He knows our moves. He's 2 steps ahead because you gave him the map. Deacon stood. His chair scraped against the floor, a sound like something tearing. He unzipped his cut and laid it on the bar with the patches facing up, the winged skull, the Steel Guardian's rocker. 11 years of brotherhood folded into a gesture that was as close to bleeding out as a man could get without opening a vein. I made a mistake, he said. I thought I was being smart. I thought I could manage him. I was wrong. Take your cut, Ryder said. I don't deserve... Take your cut, Deacon. This isn't about punishment. This is about what happens in the next 2 hours. I need every member focused, and I need you at that school at 8 o'clock when the doors open, talking to Patrick Brennan, the school counselor. You know how to read people. Use it for the right side this time. Deacon stared at the cut on the bar. Then he picked it up and put it back on without a word. He walked out the front door into the pale morning, and the sound of his motorcycle starting was the loneliest engine note Ryder had ever heard. Lena turned to Ryder. You should have pulled his patch. I need bodies more than I need principles right now. That's a dangerous trade. Everything about this is dangerous. The clock read 7:12 a.m. 1 hour and 18 minutes until CPS opened. 1 hour and 48 minutes until Judge Hale potentially signed the restraining order. The window was narrowing with the mechanical precision of a trap. Ryder's phone rang. Grit. Movement at the Boone house. What kind of movement? He's loading the truck. Suitcases? 2 of them. And a black duffel bag. He just carried a box of files from the house. Looked like paperwork. He's packing, Ryder. The bottom fell out of Ryder's stomach. Is Maddie with him? Not yet. He's moving fast, making trips between the house and the truck. Every time he goes inside, I lose visual for 30 to 45 seconds. Stay on him. Do not let that truck leave. If he puts Maddie in the truck, what's the call? Ryder looked at Lena. Lena looked at Banks. The 3 of them stood in the Iron Bell at 7:14 a.m., their reflections caught in the mirror behind the bar. 3 exhausted, rain-soaked, caffeine-destroyed people who had spent 43 hours trying to save a child through a system that operated at the speed of paperwork, and were now watching a man prepare to disappear with her at the speed of desperation. If she's in the truck, Ryder said, we stop the truck. That crosses a line, Lena said. He's the one crossing lines. We're just standing in the road. Ryder, If we physically prevent a legal guardian from transporting his child, it's kidnapping. We go to prison. Maddie goes into the foster system. Travis's attorney files an injunction, and every piece of evidence we've gathered gets thrown out as fruit of the poisonous tree. And if we don't stop him, he drives across the state line and Maddie vanishes. A man who we believe killed her mother takes her somewhere we can't find her. Which outcome do you want to live with, Lena? Lena's left hand was shaking so violently she pressed it against her thigh. Her right hand gripped the manila folder of Rita Okafor's medical records. Her jaw was clenched so tight Ryder could see the tendons in her neck. Neither, she said. I want a third option. Then find one. You have about 15 minutes. Ryder walked outside. The morning air hit him like cold water, sharp, clarifying, stripping away the fog of sleeplessness and replacing it with something cleaner and more dangerous. He straddled his Harley and kicked the engine to life. The sound ripped through the quiet street like a declaration of war. Low, rolling, the mechanical heartbeat of a machine that existed for the sole purpose of moving forward. He pulled out his phone and opened the group channel. All Steel Guardians, this is Kane. Travis Boone is packing his vehicle at Pinewood Terrace. We believe he intends to flee with Maddie Harper. Mobilize immediately. Hatchet, Rooster. Cover the north exit of Pinewood. Banks. Contact State Police Corbin Barracks now. Tell them we have a suspected child endangerment flight in progress. Mercy. Get to Roosevelt Elementary and intercept the school counselor. Deacon. You're already en route. Stay on mission. Every other member. I want bikes on Route 9, Highway 11, and the county road network. If that truck moves, I want eyes on it from every direction. He paused. The engine rumbled beneath him. The sky was turning the color of a bruise. This is not a drill. This is not a vote. If Maddie Harper gets in that truck and crosses the county line, we may never see her again. I am not giving an order. I am telling you what I'm going to do. Anyone who wants to ride, ride. Within 12 minutes, the sound of Harley engines began converging on the iron bell from every direction. A growing, rolling thunder that shook the windows and turned heads on the sidewalks of a town that was barely awake. They came from residential streets and apartment complexes and trailer parks and the overnight shift at the mill on Route 7. They came alone and in pairs and in clusters, their headlights cutting through the morning mist like searchlights. Ryder counted them as they arrived. 15, 20, 35, 50. By 7:40 a.m., 112 Steel Guardians and Allied riders filled the Iron Bell's parking lot, their engines creating a harmonic wall of sound that vibrated in the chest and tasted like gasoline and iron. His phone buzzed. Grit. Ryder, he just brought Maddie out of the house. She's in the truck. Front seat. She's not moving. He's closing the tailgate. Ryder's hand tightened on the throttle. He's getting in the driver's seat. The engine of the F-250 turned over, audible even through the phone, and the sound of it was the sound of a door closing on a child's life. He's moving, backing out of the driveway, turning east on Pinewood, heading toward Route 9. Ryder looked at the sea of motorcycles around him. 112 riders. 224 hands gripping handlebars. The combined weight of men and women who had survived wars and prisons and loss and silence, who had found each other in the wreckage and built something that looked like chaos from the outside and felt like family from within. He revved the engine once. The sound cut through the morning like a blade. All riders, he said into the group channel. He's on the move. Route 9, eastbound. We ride. The parking lot erupted. 112 motorcycles roared to life simultaneously. A sound so massive, so primal, so impossibly loud that it shattered the morning silence of Harlan County like a fist through stained glass. They poured out of the Iron Bell lot in a river of chrome and black leather, splitting into formation on the two-lane road, engines screaming, headlights blazing, the road itself seeming to tremble beneath the combined force of a brotherhood that had spent 43 hours trying to do things the right way and had just run out of right ways to do them. Ryder rode at the front. The wind hit his face like a slap, cold, wet, clarifying. Behind him stretched a column of motorcycles that filled the road from shoulder to shoulder, a moving wall of sound and intention that was visible from a quarter mile away and audible from further than that. His phone was mounted on his handlebars. Grit's voice crackled through the speaker. "He's on Route 9, passing the gas station. Speed increasing. He sees us, Ryder. He's accelerating." And somewhere ahead, in the cab of a black Ford F-25, with mud on the wheel wells and a cracked windshield, Travis Boone looked in his rearview mirror and saw the horizon filling with headlights, an army of light and thunder bearing down on him with the unstoppable momentum of a promise made to a child who had never been promised anything. And for the first time in his carefully constructed, meticulously controlled life, the man who had starved and caged and possibly murdered understood a truth that no lawyer and no judge and no forged document could protect him from. He was not the most dangerous thing in this story. He never had been. The F-250 hit 70 on Route 9 before the first mile marker. Ryder saw it happen through the gray morning haze, the truck's brake lights flaring once as Travis took the curve past the gas station, then disappearing as the accelerator hit the floor and the vehicle surged forward with the desperate energy of a man who had just realized that the rules he'd spent 3 years manipulating no longer applied. The engine note of the Ford changed, deeper, angrier, the sound of 8 cylinders being pushed past the point of rational driving by a man whose rationality was bleeding out through the cracks in his plan. Grit's voice came through the phone mounted on Ryder's handlebars, steady as a metronome despite the wind noise. "He's doing 75, 80. Road's wet, Ryder. He takes that next curve too fast. He's in the ditch." Or worse, Maddie was in that truck, 43 pounds of living proof that the system could fail a child so completely that a motorcycle club had to fill the gap. She was in the passenger seat of a vehicle being driven by a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to run from. And every mile per hour he added to the speedometer was a mile per hour closer to a catastrophe that would render everything they'd done meaningless. Ryder throttled back. The Harley's engine dropped from a scream to a growl, and behind him the column of riders responded. 112 motorcycles decelerating in a wave that rippled backward through the formation like a signal through a nervous system. He wasn't going to chase Travis Boone into a high-speed crash with a child in the vehicle. That was the kind of thinking that belonged to men who confused action with purpose. All riders, reduce speed. Do not pursue. Repeat. Do not pursue. Contain and redirect. "Ryder, he's pulling away!" Hatchett's voice cut through the channel. Hatchett was riding the North Parallel Road, a farm lane that ran alongside Route 9, separated by a quarter-mile of dormant soybean fields. He could see the truck's roof above the tree line, moving fast, getting smaller. "Let him pull." "Banks. State Police." "Already called. Corbin Barracks dispatched 2 units, ETA 15 minutes to the Route 9 and Highway 11 interchange." 15 minutes is too long. "It's what we have." Ryder's mind moved at the speed of a man who'd spent 2 decades planning under fire. Route 9 ran east for 11 miles before it intersected Highway 11. From there, Travis had 2 options: north toward the interstate and potential disappearance, or south toward Braddock and a network of rural roads that could swallow a single vehicle for days. If he reached Highway 11 before anyone cut him off, the geometry of escape tilted decisively in his favor. But Route 9 wasn't a straight line. It curved through the foothills east of town, following the river valley through a series of switchbacks that no vehicle, especially not a heavy top-weighted pickup truck on wet pavement, could take at high speed without risk. The road was a negotiation between momentum and physics, and Travis Boone was losing that negotiation with every curve. "Rooster, where are you?" "County Road 4, heading east. I can cut across to the Millbridge Junction and get ahead of him on Route 9. "Do it. Park sideways at Millbridge, block the road. But stay with your bike. Do not approach the vehicle. I want him to see a wall, not a fight." "Copy." "Mercy. School status?" "I'm at Roosevelt. Brennan isn't here yet. The principal is opening the building now." "Stay there. If this goes wrong and Travis doubles back, the school is the first place he'll go for cover. He'll try to construct a narrative. Panicked father, dangerous bikers chased him. He came to the school for help. I need you there to counter that story." "Understood." The column of motorcycles rolled east at 50 miles per hour. Steady, deliberate. The collective engine note a low continuous thunder that flattened the morning air and turned the heads of early commuters in their cars. They weren't chasing, they were herding. Every rider who peeled off to a side road or a parallel lane was a point on a tightening perimeter. Not a noose, Ryder told himself, but a net. His phone buzzed. Lena. I'm at CPS. Doors aren't open yet. Rita's with me. Where are you? Route 9. Travis is running. Running where? East. He's got Maddie. Silence. 3 seconds that lasted an hour. Ryder, I'm 20 feet from the CPS front door. I can be inside in 8 minutes. If I get an emergency removal order signed before he crosses the county line, state police can execute it on contact. You need a judge for that. Not for an emergency temporary order. CPS has the authority to issue a 72-hour protective hold if there's documented evidence of imminent harm. Rita's medical records qualify. The fact that he's fleeing with the child qualifies. If I can get a caseworker to sign off, it becomes a law enforcement matter immediately. Then get inside and get it signed. Call me the second you have paper. Ryder. What? Don't let him cross the county line. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The throttle answered for him. A twist of the wrist that sent the Harley surging forward, the engine's roar swallowing Lena's voice and replacing it with the only language Ryder had ever fully trusted. The sound of a machine moving toward something that mattered. 7 miles ahead, the F-250 screamed through a curve that bent the road nearly 90 degrees around a granite outcropping locals called Dead Man's Elbow. Travis took it at 65. The truck's rear end broke loose on the wet asphalt, sliding 2 feet toward the guardrail before the tires caught and the vehicle straightened with a lurch that would have terrified any rational driver. But Travis wasn't rational anymore. Travis was a machine running its own emergency protocol. Fight or flight stripped of the fight option. Pure flight, pedal on the floor, eyes on the mirror. Inside the cab, Maddie sat in the passenger seat with her seatbelt on and her torn backpack clutched against her chest. She hadn't spoken since Travis pulled her out of the house 23 minutes ago. She hadn't cried. She hadn't asked where they were going. She sat with the stillness of a child who had learned through years of careful training that stillness was the only thing that didn't get punished. But her eyes were moving, watching the side mirror, watching the headlights appear and disappear on the road behind them, the distant constellation of 100 motorcycles that she couldn't hear over the truck's engine but could see, scattered across the gray morning landscape like stars that had fallen to earth and were following her. Travis's hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2. His knuckles were white. A vein pulsed in his temple, visible even in the dim light of the cab. He was sweating despite the cold, the sweat of a man whose control was hemorrhaging, whose carefully built world was disintegrating 1 brick at a time, and whose only remaining strategy was velocity. We're going on a trip, he said. His voice was tight, pitched higher than normal, the voice of a man performing calm, just for a while, until things settle down. Maddie didn't respond. Those people, those bikers, they don't understand our family, Maddie. They're dangerous. They're trying to take you away from me. Nothing. Maddie, look at me. She didn't look at him. She looked at the side mirror where the headlights were getting closer. Travis's composure cracked. Just a fissure, a tightening of the jaw, a sharp exhale through the nose, the micro-expression of a man who was accustomed to obedience and was not receiving it. I said, look at me. Maddie turned her head. She looked at Travis Boone with an expression that no 8-year-old should be capable of producing. Not fear, not anger, but assessment. The cold, clinical evaluation of a creature determining whether the predator in its proximity was about to strike. Mom didn't drive into that wall, she said. The words were so quiet, they were almost swallowed by the engine noise. But they hit Travis like a bullet. His head snapped toward her, his hands jerked on the wheel, and the truck swerved 6 inches before he corrected. What did you say? I heard you. That night. On the phone. Before it happened. You told someone the brakes would look normal. Travis stared at her. The road curved ahead. He didn't see it. For 3 seconds that contained the entire architecture of his carefully constructed lie, he stared at the 8-year-old girl in his passenger seat and realized that the child he'd been starving, isolating, silencing, and caging for 14 months had been carrying the one piece of evidence that could destroy him. Not in a backpack, not in a notebook, but in her memory. You don't know what you heard, he said. I know what I heard. You were 6 years old. You were asleep. I wasn't asleep. I was in the closet, the one you locked me in when Mom went out. The walls are thin. I heard everything. The truck's speedometer read 72. The road ahead narrowed as it approached Millbridge Junction, where County Road 6 crossed Route 9 at an angle that created a natural bottleneck. Two lanes becoming one, flanked by concrete barriers on either side where a bridge crossed the Elk Fork Creek. And there, sideways across the road, sat Rooster's motorcycle. Rooster himself stood 20 feet behind the bike, arms crossed, his massive frame backlit by the headlights of a flatbed truck that had stopped behind him. He didn't move. He didn't need to. The motorcycle across both lanes was a statement, and the man behind it was the punctuation. Travis saw the blockade at a quarter mile. His foot moved from the accelerator to the brake. The F250 began to decelerate. 70, 60, 50. The anti-lock brakes pulsing against the wet road, the truck's nose dipping as momentum fought friction. He could stop. He could turn around. He could drive around the motorcycle by cutting through the muddy shoulder. He chose the shoulder. The F250 lurched right, its passenger side tires leaving the pavement and biting into soft earth. Mud sprayed. The truck fishtailed. Maddie grabbed the door handle with both hands as the vehicle tilted, its center of gravity shifting dangerously as two wheels found traction and two didn't. For one horrible second, the truck was going to roll. Then it didn't. The tires caught gravel beneath the mud, the suspension absorbed the lurch, and the F250 powered past Rooster's blockade with 6 inches of clearance between its mirror and the concrete barrier. Rooster dove sideways, the truck's wake of mud and water sprayed across his chest. "He's through Millbridge," Rooster gasped into the channel. "Almost took me out. He's insane, Ryder. He'll kill that kid before he stops." Ryder was 2 miles behind in closing. The Harley ate the distance in smooth, leaning curves, its engine note rising and falling with the terrain. Behind him, the column had thinned as riders dispersed to secondary positions. But 37 motorcycles still followed in a loose V formation that filled both lanes. Banks. State Police update. Units are on Highway 11. They're setting up at the interchange. He's 4 miles from them. Lena? I'm inside CPS. Caseworker is reviewing Rita's documents. She's moving fast, but she needs to make 3 phone calls. Ryder, I need 10 more minutes. You might not have 10 minutes. Then I need 5. Route 9 straightened for a long half-mile stretch that ran parallel to the river. The water was high from 2 days of rain, brown and fast, churning against the banks with the mindless energy of something that didn't care about anything human. The road was flat here, and Ryder could see the F250 ahead, a black shape moving fast against the gray landscape, its brake lights flickering as Travis navigated the wet road with diminishing control. And then Ryder saw something else. A small hand pressed against the passenger window, not waving, just pressed flat against the glass. 5 fingers spread wide, holding still. The gesture Ryder had told her. Find a way to a window and wave. She wasn't waving. She was doing something more deliberate. She was placing her hand against the glass and holding it there, a signal that was half wave and half plea, and entirely the action of a child who had listened to a promise and was testing whether it was real. Ryder's vision tunneled. The world narrowed to a single point, that handprint on the glass, 5 small fingers against a rain-streaked window, the only communication possible between a child trapped in a moving vehicle and the man who'd promised she wasn't invisible. I see you, he said, though she couldn't hear him. I see you, Maddie. His phone rang. Lena. We have it. Emergency protective hold. CPS has issued a 72-hour temporary custody order placing Maddie Harper in state protective care. It's signed. I'm sending it to the state police right now. They need to intercept before Highway 11. They know. Ryder, there's more. The caseworker, when she saw Rita's medical records alongside the documentation we provided, she made a call to the state police herself. She told them about the insurance documents, the forged signatures, everything. They're not just intercepting for the custody order. They're treating this as a potential felony flight. The road ahead curved one final time before the Highway 11 interchange. The curve was gentle. a long sweeping arc through a stand of bare-branched trees that bordered the river. At the far end of the curve, visible through the trees, Ryder could see blue and red lights. Two state police cruisers positioned across the Highway 11 on-ramp, their light bars painting the morning fog in alternating bursts of color. Travis saw them too. The F-250's brake lights blazed solid red. The truck decelerated hard. 60, 40, 20. And for a moment, Ryder thought it was over. The man would stop. The police would approach. Maddie would be removed. The system, for once in its miserable bureaucratic existence, would work. But Travis Boone had not spent 3 years building a fortress of lies only to surrender at a roadblock. The F-250 stopped 200 yards from the state police cruisers. It sat in the middle of Route 9, engine running, brake lights glowing, motionless. Behind it, Ryder's column of motorcycles slowed to a stop, 37 bikes spreading across the road like a steel curtain. Ahead, the police cruisers waited with their light bars spinning. Travis was boxed. No exits, no side roads. The river on one side, a steep embankment on the other, police in front, bikers behind. The geometry of his escape had collapsed into a cage. Ryder dismounted. He pulled the key from the ignition and pocketed it. The Harley's engine dying with a shudder that left a void of silence so sudden it felt like pressure change. Behind him, one by one, 37 other engines shut off. The silence accumulated like snowfall, each extinguished engine adding another layer of quiet until the only sounds remaining were the river, the rain on the road, and the idling rumble of the F-250. He walked forward. Not fast. Not slow. The pace of a man crossing open ground towards something that might kill him, which was the pace Ryder knew best, the one that lived in his muscle memory from 100 patrols in cities where every doorway was a question and every rooftop was a potential answer. Two state police officers emerged from their cruisers. One raised a hand toward Ryder. "Stop. Stay back. This is ours now." Ryder stopped. He stood in the middle of Route 9, 50 yards behind the F-250, rain collecting on his shoulders and running down the leather of his cut. "Travis Boone." The officer's voice came through a loudspeaker, distorted and authoritative. "Turn off the engine. Step out of the vehicle with your hands visible." Nothing happened. "Mr. Boone, we have an emergency custody order issued by Harlan County Child Protective Services. You are required to surrender the child immediately." The F-250 sat still. The engine idled. The wipers moved back and forth, a metronome counting seconds that felt like hours. Then the driver's door opened. Travis Boone stepped out. He moved slowly, deliberately, with the careful posture of a man who understood that sudden movements in front of law enforcement ended badly. He was still wearing the navy blue jacket. His hair was still neat. Even now, cornered, caught, exposed, he maintained the surface, the performance, the mask. "Officers, there's been a terrible misunderstanding," he began, and his voice carried the same smooth, concerned tone he'd used at the Iron Bell doorway, the voice of a man who believed that presentation could override reality indefinitely. "Hands on the vehicle, sir. I'm a concerned father. These people have been harassing my family. I was taking my daughter somewhere safe. Hands on the vehicle. Now." Travis placed his hands on the hood of the F-250. The rain darkened the shoulders of his jacket. One officer moved toward him while the other approached the passenger side of the truck. Ryder watched. His fists were clenched at his sides. His jaw was locked. Every fiber of his training told him to stay still, let the system execute, trust the process. But the process was a machine he'd watched malfunction for 3 days, and the only thing preventing him from crossing those 50 yards was the knowledge that doing so would destroy the legal case that had taken 45 hours and 150 people to build. The officer on the passenger side opened the door. Maddie sat in the seat with her backpack against her chest and her seatbelt still buckled. She looked at the officer with those enormous ancient eyes, the eyes that had scanned the Iron Bell for exits, that had watched Travis through a closet wall, that had stared at a plate of chicken strips for 11 seconds before believing it was real. "Hi there," the officer said. "My name is Trooper Davis. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" "Maddie Harper." "Maddie, I'm going to unbuckle your seatbelt. Is that okay?" She nodded. The trooper reached across her carefully, clicked the belt release, and the strap retracted. Maddie didn't move. She sat in the seat, liberated from the mechanism that had held her in place, and she didn't move because moving required a kind of trust that 3 years of abuse had systematically dismantled. Then she looked past the trooper, past the cruisers with their spinning lights, down the long, wet stretch of Route 9, where 37 motorcycles sat in silence, and one man stood alone in the rain, 50 yards away, watching her with an expression that carried no smile and no wave and no performance, just the raw, undecorated attention of a human being who had seen her, who had heard her, who had promised. Maddie reached into her backpack. She pulled out the torn school notebook, the same one she'd carried into the Iron Bell 2 nights ago. She held it against her chest with one hand. Then she extended the other hand toward Trooper Davis. "I want to go to the bikers," she said. "Sweetheart, we need to... Please, I want to go to the bikers." Davis looked at his partner, who was handcuffing Travis against the hood of the F250. He looked at the line of motorcycles. He looked at the small, impossibly thin girl sitting in the passenger seat of a truck, driven by a man who had just fled with her across a county. "Which one?" he asked. Maddie pointed. One finger. One direction. One man standing in the rain. Davis lifted her from the seat. She weighed almost nothing. He could feel it in the way his arms barely registered the load, and something shifted in his face, a micro-expression of horror that he buried immediately under professionalism. He carried her past the cruisers, past the spinning lights, into the open space of the road. Then he set her down. Maddie stood on Route 9 in the rain, 50 yards from Ryder Kane, wearing the same yellow raincoat she'd worn 2 nights ago, and holding a torn notebook against her chest. She didn't run. Running was something children did when they trusted the ground beneath them, and Maddie had never trusted any ground. She walked, slowly, each step deliberate, each foot placed with the precision of someone crossing a surface that might give way. Ryder didn't move toward her. He understood. In the marrow of his bones, in the scar tissue of his face, in the place where 3 combat tours had taught him that the distance between people was sacred and could only be closed by the person who needed it most. That this walk was hers. Not his. Hers. She covered the 50 yards in just under 2 minutes. The rain soaked through her raincoat. Her sneakers, still duct-taped at the toes, splashed through shallow puddles that reflected the police lights in fragmented blue and red. Behind her, Travis Boone was being placed in the back of a state police cruiser, his smooth voice still explaining, still performing, still believing that the right words in the right order could rebuild a lie that 150 bikers and one 8-year-old had torn apart. Maddie stopped in front of Ryder. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. The rain fell between them like a curtain neither of them needed to part. "You came," she said. "Told you I would." She opened the notebook. Inside, pressed between 2 pages near the middle, was a drawing. Not the yellow motorcycle she'd given him before, but a new one, drawn in the cab of the truck while Travis loaded suitcases. It showed a row of stick figures on motorcycles, maybe 20 of them, drawn in black crayon. Above them, in careful, uneven letters that an 8-year-old hand had formed with the maximum concentration available to it, were 2 words: "My family." Ryder took the notebook. His hands were shaking, not from cold, not from adrenaline, from something that had no tactical name and no military application and no place in the vocabulary of a man who had spent 2 decades converting emotion into action. His hands shook because a child had drawn a picture of him and called it family, and that was a weapon against which he had no defense. He knelt. The wet road soaked through his jeans. He didn't care. He knelt in front of Maddie Harper on Route 9 in Harlan County in the rain, surrounded by 37 silent motorcycles and 2 state police cruisers and the wreckage of a lie that had taken 3 years to build and 45 hours to destroy. And he said nothing because there was nothing to say that the moment didn't already contain. Maddie stepped forward and put her arms around his neck. She was so light, so impossibly, terrifyingly light. Ryder's arms closed around her with the desperate gentleness of a man holding something that the world had tried to erase, and behind him he heard it, the sound of 37 bikers who had not clapped, had not cheered, had not made a single noise throughout the entire exchange, simultaneously starting their engines. Not to ride, not to chase, just to be heard. to fill the silence with something that sounded like a heartbeat, to let a child feel, through the vibration of the road beneath her feet and the rumble in the air around her, that the world she stood in was no longer empty. Grit's voice came through Ryder's earpiece, barely audible above the engines. "Lena's on her way with the paperwork. CPS caseworker is en route. State police are transporting Boone to Corbin for processing." Copy. And Ryder, "Banks just got a call from the state police forensic unit. They're requesting the insurance documents. They're opening a case." Ryder closed his eyes. The rain hit his face. Maddie's arms tightened around his neck. In his pocket, the folded yellow motorcycle drawing pressed against his chest, and in his hands, the notebook with the words, "My family," sat like a weight that was heavier than anything he'd carried in any war. "It's not over," Grit said. "I know. But the part where she's alone, that part's over." Ryder held Maddie Harper on a wet road in the middle of Harlan County, while the engines of 37 motorcycles rumbled around them like a wall that nothing, not a lie, not a lawyer, not a locked closet, not a man with a padlock and a forged signature, could ever breach again. Behind them, a state police cruiser pulled onto the highway carrying Travis Boone toward a future that contained interrogation rooms and forensic accountants and the slow, grinding machinery of a justice system that had finally, after 3 years and 31 missed school days and 4 consecutive weight losses and 3 ignored CPS reports and 1 dead mother and 1 padlocked pantry, woken up. And in front of them, through the rain, the sun was trying to break through, not dramatically, not cinematically, just a thin line of gold at the horizon, where the clouds had worn thin enough to let something through. Maddie lifted her head from Ryder's shoulder. She looked at the light. "Is it morning?" she asked. "Yeah," Ryder said. "It's morning." But even as the words left his mouth, his phone buzzed one final time. A text from Banks. 6 words that turned the gold on the horizon cold. Boone made a call from the cruiser. "Someone else is coming." The call Travis Boone made from the back of the state police cruiser lasted 41 seconds. Banks traced it within 3 minutes. Not to a lawyer, not to a friend, not to anyone in Harlan County. The number belonged to a man named Victor Lyle, registered to an address in Knoxville, Tennessee, 167 miles southeast. Banks had the background pulled before Ryder finished loading Maddie into Lena's car outside the CPS office on Maple Street. Victor Lyle, 53, former auto mechanic. Specialty in brake systems and vehicle electronics. He ran a shop in Knoxville until 2 years ago when it closed under a cloud of insurance fraud allegations that never went to trial. No criminal record. But here's the thing. His cell phone records show 17 calls to and from Travis Boone in the 6 weeks before Sarah Harper's accident. 17 calls. Then nothing. Total silence after the crash. Until today. Ryder stood on the sidewalk outside CPS. The rain had thinned to a cold mist that hung in the air like something undecided. Maddie was inside the building with Lena, Rita Okafor, and a caseworker named Diana Marsh Tot. No relation to Lena, who had processed the emergency protective hold and was now conducting an intake assessment that would determine the next 72 hours of the girl's life. "He's the mechanic," Ryder said. The words came out flat, factual. The voice of a man assembling the final pieces of a picture he'd been staring at for 2 days. That's the working theory. 17 calls in 6 weeks, then a woman dies in a single-car accident involving unexplained loss of vehicle control, and the calls stop. Travis collects a $250,000 insurance payout. The mechanic's shop closes. No more contact until Travis is sitting in handcuffs and makes one phone call. Not to his lawyer, not to his family, to Victor Lyle. He called to warn him. Or to activate a contingency. Either way, it means Lyle is connected to whatever happened to Sarah Harper, and Travis just told him the walls are closing in. Ryder leaned against the brick wall of the CPS building. His body was starting to fail. 47 hours without sleep, running on black coffee, and the kind of adrenaline that leaves residue in the joints and a metallic taste at the back of the throat. His knees ached. His scar itched, which it only did when he was exhausted. His hands, which had been steady through 3 combat tours and a 45-hour child rescue operation, were beginning to shake in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with the human body finally presenting its invoice. "Did you forward this to state police?" Ryder asked. Send everything to the detective assigned to the case, a woman named Lieutenant Angela Cross at the Corbin Barracks. She called me back within 4 minutes. They're already pulling Lyle's records. She said, Banks paused. She said we did good work, Ryder. She said the insurance documents alone would have been enough to reopen the investigation, but the phone records connecting Travis to a brake specialist in the weeks before a fatal brake failure, that's what she called a case. A case isn't a conviction. No, but it's a start. Ryder closed his eyes. Behind them, the events of the past 2 days played in compressed sequence. Maddie in the doorway, the microphone, the chicken strips, Travis at the iron bell, the overnight surveillance, Deacon's betrayal, the chase on Route 9, the hand on the glass. All of it converging into this moment. A man standing on a sidewalk in the mist, waiting for a system he didn't trust to do the thing it should have done 3 years ago. The door to the CPS building opened. Lena stepped out. Her left hand was in her jacket pocket, hiding the tremor, as always. Her face was drawn, the skin tight across her cheekbones, the look of a woman who had been running on combat focus for 2 days and was now standing in the deceleration zone where the body starts demanding payment. She's stable, Lena said. Diana is good. She's gentle and she's thorough, and she's not leaving that room until she has a complete picture. What happens to Maddie now? Emergency foster placement while the 72-hour hold is active. After that, a family court hearing to determine temporary custody. Foster care. It's not ideal, I know. She's been locked in a closet for 14 months and starved on a schedule. Putting her in a stranger's house isn't going to feel like rescue. It's going to feel like a different cage. Lena sat on the concrete step next to him. Their shoulders almost touched. They were quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that exists between two people who have been through enough together that silence isn't absence but presence. There might be another option, Lena said carefully. Diana told me they located a biological relative, Maddie's maternal aunt, Sarah's sister. Her name is Claire Whitmore, lives in Lexington. She didn't know about Sarah's death until CPS contacted her this morning. She didn't know her own sister was dead? Travis isolated the entire family, changed phone numbers, moved, cut contact. Claire told CPS she'd been trying to find Sarah for 2 years. She filed a missing persons report that went nowhere because Sarah wasn't technically missing. She was dead, and Travis had handled the notifications himself. He told Sarah's family that she'd moved out of state and didn't want contact. Ryder processed this. Another layer of the lie. Another wall Travis had built to keep the truth inside and the world outside. Claire is driving to Harlan County now, Lena continued. She'll be here by evening. If the background check clears and the family court approves, Maddie could be placed with her aunt within the week. Does Maddie know she has an aunt? Not yet. Diana wants to wait until the intake is complete. Ryder stared at the mist. Somewhere in it, the sound of a motorcycle engine rumbled. One of the Steel Guardians on patrol, maintaining the perimeter out of habit or loyalty or the inability to stop protecting once you've started. And Deacon? Lena asked. The name landed with weight. Ryder hadn't spoken to Deacon since sending him to the school that morning. The betrayal, unintentional, born from manipulation rather than malice, but a betrayal nonetheless, sat between Ryder and the Brotherhood, like a fracture in a foundation that might hold or might not. Deacon got to the school counselor, Ryder said. Brennan confirmed everything. Maddie's behavior changes, the weight loss, 2 separate incidents where she came to school with frostbitten fingers from being left outside in winter. Brennan had documented all of it. He was ready to testify. That doesn't answer my question. I know. Ryder rubbed his face with both hands. The stubble was 2 days old and felt like sandpaper. Deacon made a mistake. He didn't betray us. He got played by a man who's better at manipulation than anyone we've ever dealt with. Travis Boone reads people the way Banks reads data. He found Deacon's frequency and tuned into it. And if it happens again, it won't. Because Travis Boone is going to spend the rest of his life in a room where the only person he can manipulate is himself. The afternoon unfolded in a series of institutional processes that moved with the agonizing precision of machinery, designed for thoroughness rather than speed. The CPS intake assessment took 3 hours. The state police conducted a preliminary interview with Maddie, at the CPS office with Diana present and a child advocacy specialist on speakerphone from Frankfurt. Maddie spoke in the same flat, recitative voice she'd used at the Iron Bell, cataloging horrors with the clinical detachment of a child who had learned that emotion was a vulnerability. She told them about the padlocked pantry, the closet under the stairs, the 31 missed school days, each one a punishment for something she could never predict. A wrong word, a wrong look, the sin of existing in a house that belonged to a man who had erased her mother and resented the evidence she'd left behind. She told them about the night her mother died, about lying in the closet with her cheek pressed against the thin drywall, listening to Travis's voice through the wall, a phone conversation she wasn't supposed to hear, words she'd carried for 14 months without understanding their full meaning. She told them about the breaks will look normal, and about Travis's voice being calm, almost bored, the voice of a man conducting a transaction. And she told them about the money, about Travis unlocking the pantry on the rare occasions when someone was scheduled to visit, a CPS investigator, a school official, a neighbor who'd called ahead, and filling it with food that disappeared the moment the visitor left. The pantry was a stage set. The full refrigerator was a prop. The Concerned Father performance was a play that ran on a schedule Travis controlled with the same precision he'd used to control Maddie's meals. By 3 p.m., Lieutenant Angela Cross from the state police had enough to request a search warrant for the Boone residence. By 4 p.m., the warrant was signed. By 5 p.m., a forensic team was inside the house on Pinewood Terrace, photographing the padlock on the pantry door, measuring the closet under the stairs, 4 feet by 3 feet, no light, no ventilation, a thin blanket on the floor that smelled like mildew, and cataloging the filing cabinet in Travis's home office that contained 3 years of forged medical records, fabricated therapy notes, and a life insurance policy with a signature that didn't belong to the woman it claimed to represent. Banks watched the search remotely through updates from Lieutenant Cross, relaying information to Ryder in real time from the Iron Bell's back office. The details came in fragments, each one a brick removed from the wall Travis had built, each one revealing more of the darkness he'd enclosed. At 5:47 p.m., the forensic team found something in the garage, a cardboard box, taped shut, pushed behind a shelf of paint cans and old power tools. Inside the box were Sarah Harper's personal effects, her wallet, her phone, her wedding ring from her first marriage, and a handwritten letter addressed to Maddie that Sarah had apparently written before her death, tucked inside an envelope that had never been opened. Banks read the discovery report to Ryder over the phone. When he reached the part about the letter, his voice broke. Not dramatically, not with a sob, but with a hairline crack in the frequency, the sound of a man whose professional detachment had reached its load limit. He kept her things in a box in the garage, Banks said. Her phone, her ring, like trophies. Ryder was sitting in the Iron Bell, alone, at the same table where Maddie had eaten chicken strips 2 nights ago. The table hadn't been cleared. The plate was still there, pushed to one side, the residue of mashed potatoes dried to a pale crust. He stared at it while Banks talked, and he thought about the 11 seconds Maddie had stared at the plate before believing it was real, and he thought about how many seconds it would take for the rest of the world to believe what had happened in that house. "The letter," Ryder said. "What does it say?" "They haven't opened it. It's evidence. But it's addressed to Maddie, and Lieutenant Cross said that once the forensic process is complete, it'll be given to her." "Good." "Ryder." "Yeah. Go home. Sleep. You've been awake for almost 50 hours. "Not yet." At 6:15 p.m., a silver Honda Accord with Kentucky plates pulled into the parking lot of the Harlan County CPS office. A woman got out, late 30s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a gray sweater and jeans that looked like they'd been put on in a hurry. She had Sarah Harper's cheekbones. She had Sarah Harper's eyes. And she stood in the parking lot for a full 30 seconds, staring at the building, one hand pressed against her stomach as if holding something in place. Claire Whitmore had driven 3 hours from Lexington in a state of controlled disintegration. She had received a phone call that morning informing her that her sister, her younger sister, the one she'd been searching for, the one she'd filed reports about, the one whose absence had been a wound she'd carried for 2 years, was dead. Had been dead for 14 months. Had died in circumstances that were now the subject of a criminal investigation. And that her sister's daughter, her niece, a girl she'd never met, was alive, underweight, traumatized, and waiting inside a government building in a town Claire had never visited. She walked into the CPS office and was met by Diana Marsh, who led her to a room where Maddie sat at a small table, drawing. Claire stopped in the doorway. Maddie looked up. The two of them stared at each other across 8 feet of institutional carpet, and the resemblance was so immediate, so unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same slight tilt of the head when processing something enormous, that Maddie's crayon stopped moving and her mouth opened slightly, forming the beginning of a word she didn't finish. "You look like my mom," Maddie whispered. Claire's composure shattered, not violently. She didn't collapse, didn't wail, didn't rush forward. She simply stood in the doorway and let the tears come without fighting them, without apologizing for them, without performing them. They fell straight and quiet, the tears of a woman who had just found something she'd been looking for in the face of a child she'd never known. "I'm your Aunt Claire," she said. "Your mom was my sister, and I've been trying to find you for a very long time." Maddie set down her crayon. She looked at Diana, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She looked at Claire, studying her face with the same clinical assessment she applied to every new adult, scanning for threat, calculating distance, reading intent. Then she slid off her chair and walked across the room and stopped 2 feet from Claire, looking up at her the way she'd looked up at Ryder on Route 9, not with trust, not yet, but with something adjacent to it, something that could become trust if given enough time and enough meals and enough mornings where the pantry wasn't locked. "Do you have food at your house?" Maddie asked. Claire knelt. She was smiling and crying simultaneously, her face a battlefield between joy and grief, and she said, "I have so much food, Maddie. You can eat whenever you want." "Whenever I want?" "Whenever you want." Maddie nodded. She didn't hug Claire. She wasn't there yet. But she reached out and touched Claire's sweater. Just the sleeve, just the fabric between her thumb and forefinger, the smallest possible physical contact. And she held on. Diana Marsh closed the door and gave them the room. The days that followed moved at 2 speeds simultaneously, the institutional speed of legal proceedings and forensic investigations, which crawled, and the human speed of a child beginning to recalibrate her understanding of the world, which happened in unpredictable bursts. Victor Lyle was arrested at his Knoxville apartment 3 days after Travis's capture. The state police executed a search warrant that yielded financial records, text messages, and in a locked toolbox in Lyle's bedroom closet, a detailed set of notes on the brake system of a 2018 Honda Civic, written in handwriting that a forensic examiner later confirmed was Lyle's. The notes included specific instructions on how to create a gradual brake fluid leak that would result in catastrophic failure under wet conditions. Not immediately, but within a predictable window of use. Lieutenant Cross called Ryder personally to deliver the news. She didn't have to. It wasn't protocol. But she called because she understood that the man on the other end of the line had spent 3 days and 2 sleepless nights building the case that her department was now prosecuting, and the least she could do was tell him first. "We have enough," she said. "Travis Boone is being charged with first-degree murder in the death of Sarah Harper, along with felony child abuse, insurance fraud, and obstruction. Lyle is being charged as an accomplice. The DA is confident." Ryder was standing in his kitchen when the call came. It was 7 a.m. He had slept for 14 hours, the first sleep he'd had since the night Maddie walked into the Iron Bell. And he'd woken with the disoriented, raw-nerved feeling of a man whose body had rested but whose mind was still standing on Route 9 in the rain. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "Don't thank me. Thank your intelligence guy. Banks put together a dossier that would make the FBI jealous. I'll tell him. And Mr. Kane, the letter, Sarah's letter to Maddie. The forensic team cleared it. It's been given to Claire Whitmore to deliver when the time is right." Ryder hung up. He stood in his kitchen with a cup of coffee he'd just poured and hadn't yet tasted, and he looked out the window at the morning. A clear morning, the first clear sky in 4 days, blue and cold and sharp-edged, the kind of morning that felt like permission to begin something. 2 weeks later, the Steel Guardians hosted a gathering at the Iron Bell. Not a fundraiser, not a charity event, just a gathering. The kind that doesn't have a name because naming it would formalize something that existed best in its informal state. The tables were pushed back, the jukebox played low. Someone had strung white lights across the ceiling that gave the room a warm amber glow that softened the rough edges of the wood and the leather and the faces of men and women who'd earned every line. They came in ones and twos and small groups, patched members and their families, civilians who'd been at the fundraiser that night, teachers from Roosevelt Elementary, Rita Okafor with her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, Deputy Engstrom in civilian clothes, looking like a man who'd been given the chance to be on the right side of something and was still getting used to the feeling. Even Principal Kessler came, standing near the bar with a glass of wine she held but barely drank, watching the room with the expression of a woman who had spent decades inside a system and was seeing, for the first time, what happened when people went around it. Claire Whitmore arrived at 6 with Maddie. The room didn't fall silent this time. The noise continued, conversation, laughter, the clink of glasses, the hum of a community being itself. But a wave of attention moved through the crowd as Maddie walked in, the way attention moves through a forest when something important enters the clearing. She was different, not transformed. Transformation was a word for movies, and this was not a movie. She was altered. Her cheeks had filled slightly in 2 weeks of regular meals. Her eyes, still large, still watchful, had lost the flatness that had characterized them at the Iron Bell, replaced by something cautious but present, the expression of a child who was learning, slowly, that looking at the world didn't always require scanning for exits. She wore new sneakers, no duct tape. She walked through the room with Claire's hand resting lightly on her shoulder, not gripping, not guiding, just present. She looked at the stage where the microphone stood, and she looked at Ryder, who was standing near the back wall with a coffee mug that had gone cold because some things don't change. She walked up to the stage. She climbed the 2 wooden steps. Claire stayed at the bottom, close but not hovering, the posture of an ant who was learning the terrain of a child who needed space more than proximity. Maddie stood behind the microphone. Someone adjusted it down for her, and this time she didn't flinch. The room quieted. Not because anyone told it to, because the room remembered. "Last time I was here," Maddie said, "I was really hungry." A ripple of something moved through the crowd. Not laughter, not tears, something between the two, the sound a room makes when it's holding both. "I eat every day now," she said. "Aunt Claire makes pancakes on Saturdays. I get to choose the shape." Someone near the bar made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Rita Okafor took off her glasses and pressed her fingers against her eyes. "I also have a bedroom. It has a window. I can open it whenever I want." She paused. She was looking at Ryder, who was standing perfectly still, his coffee mug arrested in midair, his scarred face carrying an expression that the men and women around him had never seen before and would never see again. "Thank you," Maddie said, "for hearing me." She stepped back from the microphone. The room held its breath for one more second. Then the applause started. Not the polite, organized applause of an audience, but the raw, unstructured eruption of 150 people who had been carrying the weight of a child's pain for 2 weeks and were finally allowed to set it down. Maddie walked off the stage and through the crowd. People parted for her, not because she was fragile, but because they understood that the path she was walking was specific and intentional. She walked to the back of the room where Ryder stood. He knelt. Same knee, same wet road posture, same distance. Close enough to hear, far enough to respect. Lena appeared beside him, holding something, a small leather vest, child-sized, custom-made, with a single patch sewn on the back. The patch bore the Steel Guardian's winged skull, but smaller, and beneath it, in clean white thread, 2 words, Honorary Guardian. Ryder held it out. Maddie looked at it the way she'd looked at the first plate of food, with that 11-second pause, that recalibration of belief. Then she took it. She put it on over her sweater. It fit. "It fits," she said, surprised. "Mercy measured your shoulders while you were drawing," Lena said. "She's sneaky like that." Maddie ran her fingers over the patch. She turned to look at Claire, who was standing 10 feet away with tears on her face and a smile that was trying to outrun them. "Can I keep it?" Maddie asked. "It's yours," Ryder said. "It's always been yours." The room rose. 150 people, standing, not in the stunned, horrified silence of the first night, but in something warmer and noisier and less organized, the sound of a community that had been tested and had chosen to stay. Maddie stood among them in her small leather vest, and for the first time since anyone in that room had known her, she smiled. It was small. It was tentative. It had the careful, experimental quality of a muscle being used after a long period of disuse. But it was real. And it changed the geometry of her face in a way that made Claire cover her mouth with her hand and Lena press her shaking left hand against her thigh, and Ryder look at the ceiling because looking at anything else was going to cost him the composure he'd maintained through 3 combat tours and a 47-hour rescue operation. Later, after the food, after the music, after Maddie fell asleep on a bench near the jukebox with her vest still on and her new sneakers tucked beneath her, Ryder walked outside. The night was cold and clear, stars everywhere. The kind of sky that exists in places where the light pollution hasn't reached yet, where the dark is real and the distance is visible, and the universe feels like something you could almost touch if you stood on the right hill. Deacon was sitting on the bench outside the front door, smoking a cigarette he wouldn't finish. He looked up when Ryder came out. The 2 men regarded each other in the starlight. 11 years of brotherhood between them, one mistake inside it, and the question of what remained. "She smiled," Deacon said. "Yeah." "First time?" "First time I've seen." Deacon took a drag and let the smoke out slowly, watching it dissolve into the cold air. "I'm sorry, Ryder, for the phone call, for Travis, for all of it." "I know." "Do you trust me?" Ryder considered the question. He considered it with the seriousness it deserved, not as a formality, not as a social obligation, but as an actual assessment of whether the man sitting in front of him could be relied upon to not make the same mistake again. "I trust that you'd die for anyone in that room," Ryder said. "I trust that Travis Boone found the one crack in your armor and used it. I trust that you'll spend the rest of your life making sure that crack stays sealed." "That's not the same as yes." "No, it's better. It's honest." Deacon nodded. He dropped the cigarette and ground it under his boot. He stood, and the 2 men stood in the cold, side by side, looking at the parking lot full of motorcycles and the stars above them, and the building behind them where a child was sleeping safely for the 21st consecutive night. "What happens now?" Deacon asked. "Travis goes to trial, Lyle goes to trial, Claire gets permanent custody, Maddie goes to school, eats breakfast, opens windows. And us? Same thing we always do. We ride, we watch, we show up." Deacon went inside. Ryder stayed. He pulled the yellow motorcycle drawing from the inside pocket of his cut. It was creased and soft from being carried. The crayon lines faded at the folds, the paper thin from 2 weeks of living against his chest. He looked at it under the stars. 2 circles, a triangle, something that might have been handlebars. A motorcycle drawn by a child who had walked into a room full of outlaws with nothing but a torn backpack and a truth so terrible that 150 people had stood up at the sound of it. Lena came outside. She sat on the bench Deacon had vacated. Her left hand was in her pocket. Her right hand held 2 mugs of coffee. Real coffee this time, not the burnt institutional punishment they'd been drinking for 3 days. She handed one to Ryder. "Claire asked about us," Lena said. "She wanted to know who we were. What kind of organization does this?" "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That we're a bunch of broken people who got tired of watching other people break." Ryder drank the coffee. It was hot and decent and tasted like someone had actually cared about the ratio of grounds to water. He held the mug with both hands, letting the warmth soak into his palms. The same hands that had held the handlebars of a Harley at 70 miles per hour on a wet road. The same hands that had shaken when a child handed him a drawing labeled, "My Family." "She's going to be okay," Lena said. Not as a question, as a statement delivered with the certainty of a former combat medic who had learned to distinguish between patients who were surviving and patients who were healing. Eventually. Not eventually. Already. She's already okay. The rest is just time. Inside, the jukebox changed songs. Through the wall, Ryder could hear the muffled sound of conversation and laughter, and the particular frequency of a room full of people who had been through something together and were choosing to be in each other's company not because they had to, but because the alternative, being alone with what they'd seen, was worse. A motorcycle started in the parking lot, then another. Riders heading home. The engines rumbled to life one by one, each departure a small subtraction from the night's noise, each pair of taillights shrinking on the dark road until the parking lot held only a dozen bikes, and the silence between them was comfortable instead of empty. Ryder folded the yellow drawing and put it back in his pocket. He finished his coffee. He looked at Lena, who was looking at the sky with her left hand finally, for the first time in 3 days, still. "Go home, Ryder," she said. "In a minute." "You said that 2 hours ago." "I'll say it again in 2 more." She smiled. It was a tired smile, the kind that lives in the muscles around the eyes more than the mouth, the kind that costs nothing and means everything. "Good night, Ryder." "Good night, Lena." She went inside to check on Maddie. Ryder stayed on the bench. The cold settled around him like something familiar. Not hostile, not comforting, just present, the way the world is present when you stop fighting it long enough to notice. He thought about Fallujah. He thought about the scar on his jaw and the shrapnel that gave it to him, and the man standing next to him who didn't survive the same explosion. He thought about the VA waiting room he'd stopped visiting, and the therapist he'd stopped calling, and the years he'd spent converting pain into silence, because silence was the only language that didn't ask follow-up questions. He thought about an 8-year-old girl who had walked into a room full of strangers and told the truth, and how that single act of courage, a child's courage, the kind that adults admire because they've forgotten how to produce it themselves, had set in motion a chain of events that mobilized 150 people, exposed a murder, saved a life, and reminded a decorated combat veteran that the war he'd been fighting since 2005 wasn't overseas anymore. It was here, in the closets and pantries and quiet houses of towns where people looked the other way because looking directly at suffering required a response, and responses were expensive. The last motorcycle started in the parking lot. Grit. The big man swung his leg over the seat, nodded once at Ryder. A nod that contained no words because Grit didn't traffic in words, only in presence, and rode into the night. His taillight disappeared around the curve on Route 9, and then the parking lot was empty except for Ryder's Harley, Lena's truck, and the silence. Ryder stood. His knees protested. His back protested. His body was a catalog of complaints filed by muscles and joints and old injuries that had been ignored for 47 hours and were now presenting their grievances in full. He walked to his Harley, threw a leg over the seat, and sat for a moment without starting the engine. The iron bell sat behind him, its neon sign buzzing in the dark, red and blue and faintly green where a letter had half burned out. Through the window he could see the warm, amber glow of the white lights someone had strung across the ceiling, and the silhouette of Lena moving through the room, and the small shape of Maddie sleeping on the bench in her honorary guardian vest, with her new sneakers tucked beneath her and her face, for once, unguarded. He started the engine. The Harley's roar split the silence, then settled into the low, steady rumble that was as close to a heartbeat as a machine could get. He pulled out of the lot and onto Route 9, heading west toward a home he hadn't spent a full night in for 3 days, riding through the dark under a sky full of stars, with a folded yellow drawing in his pocket, and the sound of a child's voice in his memory saying 2 words that he would carry for the rest of his life with the same weight and the same care and the same unbreakable commitment he'd once carried the names of fallen soldiers. My family. The road unrolled ahead of him, dark and open and going somewhere that mattered. He rode into it alone, but not lonely, because somewhere behind him, in a building full of warmth and light, a little girl was sleeping through the night without fear, and the world, for all its coldness and its cruelty and its institutional failures and its locked pantries, had made room for one small, undeniable, irreversible act of good. And that was enough. For tonight, that was enough.